One moment while we just get everyone in the room and get. There we go.
Okay,
There you go.
the following, sir. You ready? Everybody's ready?
You're ready.
Your agenda.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon. Today is March, February.
Okay.
20th.
All right, I will, thanks. Right. Bye.
We have quorum. I see everybody, Alan,
Okay,
David,
stay in the room.
Khalid.
Thanks, Fran.
If you're not a board member, please mute yourself.
Okay. All right then, so we start the meeting. I have a short remark I will make, and then we go to our regular meeting. Everybody's ready? Raise your hand, please, so that you're all here. The board. Okay, we are here, thank you. When Mr. Sullivan, the chair of Montgomery County GOP, provide a list of individuals who may be registered to vote in Maryland and North Carolina. In response, I requested Mr. Sullivan forward his request to the Board of Election and that his request would be shared with all board members. In addition, I forwarded the request to our board attorney, Mr. Kevin Karpinski. Kevin has been working with Mr. Boris Brakovich, this is right name, who is in charge of voter registration services, to do some preliminary research to be provided to the board at our meeting today. On the new business, the staff will give a presentation on voter list maintenance under the National Voter Registration Act and under state law. Please keep in mind that these are the legal procedures that the board is required to follow when conducting voter list maintenance. We will then discuss Mr. Sullivan's inquiry, and Boris will provide us the result of his preliminary research. That's my comment.
David want to say something?
You want to say something?
David want to say something?
No, I don't think
Yes,
so.
Madam President,
Yes,
you may recall that I emailed you yesterday about
yes, yes.
making
Yes,
a brief
I will.
remark.
Yes.
This is unrelated to the comments that you just made. I just wanted to take a moment to note the sad news of the sudden passing on February 20th of a great Montgomery County public servant, and that is former Gaithersburg Mayor and former Montgomery County Board of Education member Bruce Goldenson. Bruce had an amazing career, or you might say he had several amazing careers, including service at the Department of Defense, Mayor of Gaithersburg for 2 4-year terms, during which time Gaithersburg annexed territory in a number of different places, including where the Activity Center at Borough Park, where we have early voting, is located. A 4-year term on the county school board, and that only gets you up to 1990. More recently, he served as a board member for Caring Matters, a member of the Montgomery County Board of Appeals, a member of the Governor's Commission on Service and Volunteerism, an instructor at Montgomery College, a member of the County Council Redistricting Commission, and a volunteer for the American Heart Association, the Friends of Seneca Creek State Park, the Friends of the Gaithersburg Library, and Senior Leadership Montgomery. He was a lifelong Republican, and I'm a lifelong Democrat, which didn't stop us from being friends and allies on many issues. And I know that the board sends its condolences to his family and many friends. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you very much. Addition, changes to the agenda? No? Okay, nothing. Public comment. Lisa, you.
Disclosure.
Oh, disclosure of campaign contribution. Any of the board?
Yes, I do.
Ami,
Yes, I donated and went to the fundraiser for Jim Shalek earlier this week. I donated $150 to attend the event.
anybody else? Thank you. public comment. Raise your hand if you wanted to talk. You have only 3 minutes. Lisa, do we have any public comment? We'll register.
No one asked to address the board in advance,
Okay.
and I don't see anyone who's raised their
Yeah, all right.
hand.
Mayor Jeffrey Slavin had his hands up. At least that's what I saw.
That was the one I saw.
Looking
Who?
through.
Jeffrey
Yes.
Slavin. I
Mayor.
don't know if he still has his hand up, but I saw his hand before.
Yeah, Mayor, and Sarah Brown has her hand up.
How come I don't see that?
Sorry, we're going through 12
Oh, and
pages.
Diana Conway,
Okay, I do have,
Yeah.
Mike Jones.
And let's Lisa handle it. Go ahead.
okay, so I have Sarah Brown, who would like to address the board at this time.
Miss
Good
Brown,
afternoon.
You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. I'll make this very short. I'm very new to this. I'm a new election. I'm vying and I've passed the test and I'm in process of becoming an election judge. I'm not quite sure of the purpose of attending this meeting, although I wanted to attend this meeting. So being very, very new to this process, if you could briefly explain to me what I would do and what I would get out of this meeting and subsequent meetings, I'd really appreciate it.
What was the question?
Can someone do a 101 tutorial?
Yeah,
It isn't a 101. It's just that you have new judges coming on, and so I've been invited to attend this meeting. So from this point, I'm not quite sure how the process runs and what I get out of this and what subsequent.
Miss Brown, our board attorney will talk.
So, Ms. Brown, we have a meeting every month, and we have an agenda that gets posted that outlines everything that is covered. The bulk of it involves the election director's report for election preparation, as well as this meeting will focus on redistricting and what changes need to be made for redistricting, and scheduling future meetings to go ahead and address polling places that will need to go ahead and be changed as a result of redistricting, as well as a presentation on list maintenance, which we do every couple years. It's a refresher for the board and for the public as to what's required with regard to list maintenance in the state of Maryland. So
Very
kind
good.
of
That's all I really needed, is that kind of scope is all I was looking for.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Miss Diana Combe, Miss Combe, 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing us to speak. I won't take my whole 3 minutes either, I hope, but I'm here for 2 reasons. First is to say I'm on 2 screens and a phone that are exploding because people cannot get in and they would like to be here. So I see we're below 300, but they're still being told the meeting is at capacity or the host will let you in soon. So I have 2 suggestions. One is whoever is, letting people in or out, just please check because you have a long line. And the second is that when you have an issue like this that is clearly going to be of interest to the larger public, I highly urge you to invest in a larger capacity for the meeting so you may accommodate the public that you serve. So that's sort of the logistical stuff. The policy issue I'd like to address is that while we all understand, I'm speaking as a Democrat and the immediate past president of the Women's Democratic Club. While we all understand the need for clean, solid lists of voters for everyone's protection, I think you will recognize there is an unattractive pattern in this country that is focused on excluding as many voters as possible of a particular political and demographic characterization. And there is a lot of alarm in this county and actually across the state. I'm hearing from other people in other counties. What is going on in Montgomery County? Are we Texas? So I just wanted to put that on your plate and let you know that there's a lot of concern. I hope that the work you're going to be doing is focused on accuracy, not on the kind of voter integrity that we saw the ex-president lose 62 times out of 62 cases, claiming lack of integrity on voter rolls and voting. I'm very upset, I'm very concerned, and I'm also deeply concerned that people cannot get into a public meeting. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Mike Jones.
Mr. Mike Jones?
Yeah, hi.
I'm going to send a response.
Sorry, just a question about process. Or will the public have a chance to comment after the presentation on list maintenance?
No. No.
Why not?
Well, I know there's a lot of interest in list maintenance. I would tell you the same list maintenance procedures have been in place for a number of years, and I'm certain that some of the board members who have long-standing board members can attest that the same procedures have been in place, and it's a procedure that is based upon what's required under the National Voter Registration Act and what's under state law, which has not changed in many, many years.
So, okay, so you're saying that the whole purpose of the list maintenance discussion today is just a refresher on what the requirements are, not that there are changes proposed?
There are no changes that are being proposed to list maintenance. It is simply for new board members and for the public. Every couple years, there's an issue about what is required from list maintenance. List maintenance, the state of Maryland, is done consistent with what is required under the National Voter Registration Act, as well as the regulations, policies, and procedures promulgated by the State Board of Elections. The Montgomery County Board of Elections does not have the authority to change the list maintenance of procedures that are in place in this state.
Thank you.
Kevin, may I ask a clarifying question, please?
Sure.
Let me make sure I understand correctly, because I think I do. The list maintenance presentation is a refresher. After the list maintenance presentation, there's going to be a presentation about the concerns brought to the board majority by the Montgomery County GOP. And in neither case, I believe, you tell me if I'm wrong, is action being requested of us today?
Well,
Is that right?
There's going to be a discussion, and I think the staff's going to look for some direction either today or when we get to redistricting, which is going to be the significant part of this meeting. Certainly, if the board wishes to think about what should be done with the complaint that was, I don't want to say complaint, it was an inquiry, then that can be taken up in another meeting, because I believe the staff is recommending that the board reconvene on the 7th so we can keep redistricting moving forward. And the board's going to have some difficult decisions to make with regard to redistricting.
Yeah, no, I wasn't asking about redistricting. I think that what the gentleman was just asking about is the opportunity to speak about the issue that was brought to us by Mr. Sullivan. And I guess the question is whether there will be another opportunity, because well, I don't know what the presentation today on that subject is going to be, and I don't know whether we're going to be asked to take any action today. But if we weren't be taking any action today, then we could reassure everybody that they'll have other opportunities to make their views heard.
Well, they certainly will have other opportunities to make their views known and heard. After Boris, he's done only a preliminary review. If the board wishes to give staff further direction on what they would like to see done, then that can be done. This presentation, David, is, I mean, the numbers have changed, and the number of people that are participants at ERIC has increased, but it is virtually the same presentation that was given almost 3 years ago.
Yes, I understand. I was asking about the discussion after that. But I guess we can wait and see what happens at that discussion.
Right, okay, thank you very much, David.
So the next person I have is Mayor Jeffrey Slavin.
Mayor Jeffrey. Yes,
Oh,
sir. Go ahead.
good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to speak. First, I wanted to publicly thank the staff of the Board of Elections for the way they have made themselves available to our town to assist us in in working on our reforming our election procedures, and also apropos to the topic that so many people are interested in today regarding list maintenance. And I just wanted to state publicly how pleased we are with the response of these outstanding public officials. And then the second thing I wanted to ask, I do want to associate my comments with President Conway's comments, but I wanted to ask, in terms of this agenda item regarding the list, is there a requirement that before you take action on such an issue that it be listed on a public agenda in advance if you're taking action? I guess there's some confusion as to whether this is just a report or you're going to be taking action. But if you're taking action, aren't you required to publish that in an agenda in advance of the meeting? Thank you.
Kevin?
Thank you, Mayor. It is going to be more in the form of simply a presentation with the board providing direction to the staff. There has not been, for lack of a better term, any sort of deep dive into this inquiry. So the presentation I had suggested be put on the agenda because list maintenance is always an important topic and an interest and a topic of public interest. And it's just kind of nice to have a refresher every couple years on what's required under federal and state law.
Well, that makes complete sense. And I'm so glad so many citizens and voters are participating today. But my question was whether the board is permitted to take an action without having it listed on a publicly produced agenda in advance. And I think perhaps Mr. Naiman had the same inquiry. Aren't you prevented taking action if you haven't my question is just a technical one. If you are permitted to take action on an item that has not been publicly announced in advance of the meeting, that's my question.
Well, I think the board can take certain action without it necessarily being on the agenda, but I don't believe there's going to be any formal action taken by the board.
So when you have your meetings, you have your council president to rule on such a question. Because failing all that, I would just suggest that today you have the briefing and then consider taking any action in the future. But thank you very much.
May I ask a question of the mayor, please?
Can you make it short, please?
I will make it short. Mayor Slavin, my understanding is that Somerset allows non-citizens to vote in Somerset. Is that correct?
Residents that are not U.S. citizens, correct?
Right. Okay. Am I correct that when you do that, you are using your own supplemental voter registry, and that our voter registry does not include your resident non-citizens?
That is correct. And that's a big problem for us. And that is one of the topics that your outstanding staff is helping us to figure out for the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Because the same problem exists if because there's a possibility that we're going to add 16-year-olds to the register. So it would be the same problem with them too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Next, we have Kathy Googleus.
Kathy, Googleus.
Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. You're mute.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Googleus. I live in Montgomery County. I've also been an election judge, chief election judge twice, another election cycle also as an election judge. I was a little dismayed that the Democrat Women's Organization would find fault with the list of improvements that our Montgomery County GOP president requested. And I would refer to complaints as attempts at voter suppression. I feel his recommendations are very reasonable. The way I see it is a single instance of voter fraud negates my vote and suppresses my voting rights. Not only do I wholeheartedly support the MC GOP's chair, its position, but I have some other experiences I'd like to bring to your attention. At the fair, at the GOP booth last year, a couple came by and said that when they went to the DMV, they were asked by the person who worked there if they were registered. He saw that they were registered as Republicans and said, you don't want to be registered like that. Let me change that for you. They felt very intimidated because their business requires them to have licenses for their vehicles. And so they went ahead and said, okay, you can change it because they didn't know what would happen to their license. And then about a month ago, another acquaintance told me virtually the same kind of story. Again, he went to the DMV and the person asked, did he want to update his party affiliation? And when he said, no, I want to remain as a Republican, the guy said, I thought we got rid of all of you. So there should be a rule, I think, that the Department of Motor Vehicles cannot see how a person is registered. And they should be prohibited from advocating for a specific party because this is really intimidation, voter intimidation. So, you know, I can go on. I've had several experiences where I believe that voters have been intimidated, and I consider that suppression. I think it's an issue that we should look at. And I don't understand why we wouldn't even want to look at the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Thank you. We have David, I'm sorry, we have Margaret Montori.
After that is Raj, that lady.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right out of the gate, I find that not the last woman to speak, but before that, right out of the gate, I feel that it's my coming to the meeting. I'm unaffiliated. I'm not with the GOP, although I am looking at their list, is very insulting. This is an insulting situation on behalf of the Democrats, which I don't understand. What happened in 2020 should alarm us all. Now, I left the Democratic Party after 50 years, in part because of this issue. This is a very, very serious issue. I don't care who ran for president. If there are any questions, if it comes down to something as simple as voter rolls, why can't that garner everyone's attention? It's a very serious matter. It is the baseline of our republic. And I don't appreciate, as even the last woman said, the attitude in this county is you're a Republican, you're dirt. And quite honestly, as an unaffiliated person, and I do see this treatment of the GOP, I don't appreciate it. This is very serious. We should already have a system in place that does this yearly or every 6 months. It's a matter of investigation of computers. What could be simpler than that? So I guess what I'm saying is, number one, I've had it with the Democrat attitude. As I say, this is the issue that finally I left the Democrat Party after 50 years. And second, this is common sense. And every time a GOP, I watch this all the time, raises their hands with what I consider to be common sense suggestions, common sense as a voter, as a citizen. I'm sorry, non-citizens voting in local elections and 16-year-old voting. I remember what it was like to be a 16-year-old. That is not acceptable. But for me to be able to stand up and say that, I'm going to have mud slung at me, and I'm done with that. Thank you. I won't take up any more of your time. I think I've made my point.
Thank you, Ms. Margaret.
Next, we have Raj and Madeline.
Ms. Madeline?
Raj
Hi,
and
this is,
Raj.
yes, hi, this is Raj Gupta. I have been a citizen voter in this county for 45 years, and I have also been an election judge for many, many years. And I have always found it to be very pleasant to work as an election judge in this county. I have never seen any attempt by anybody to suppress any voter, excepting one outrageous incident that I encountered. I believe it was the 2016 presidential cycle. And I will not name names, but I think the board member concerned will recognize me. I don't know, I've disappeared from this. Okay. the board member concerned will recognize me, where there was it was not a matter of Democrat, Republican. It was a brazen attempt to suppress voting on the last day of early voting at EOB, where I was election judge. There was a very long line of voters waiting, whether they were Democrats, Republicans, or independents. I could care less. I don't know who they were, but there was a very long line outside the building. I happened to be standing at the entrance. This particular board member ought to have known, either she did not know, or he did not know, they did not know, or they did not care. They were telling the security guard to shut the doors and tell the voters to go away. I happened to be luckily there, and I spoke to the person. I said, you cannot do that. It's against the law. The last person has been given the last voter card. And until that person votes, the line will remain open. The gate will remain open. The board member backed off because I spoke to the person very, very bluntly. I said, if you do this, there could be a riot here. All these people are legitimate voters, and I will have to report this to the press. I came home that night and I wrote to the board, filing that report, what had happened. I never heard back from the board. So I'm quite disappointed when I hear these allegations about voter suppression and all kind of stuff that we are talking about. Maybe it happens someplace else, but at least in my years of work as an election judge, I've never seen that excepting that attempt, which had nothing to do with any party affiliation. So I just hope that the board does not do anything. We want to maintain this state's reputation as what it is. We do not have any evidence of voter fraud. So let us not create new procedures that will deny right to vote, not just to Republicans or Democrats. It'll affect everybody. It's a nonpartisan issue. I don't see this as a partisan issue. Let's not follow the lead of others around the country who are wasting taxpayer dollars, chasing mirage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Lisa.
Next, we have Lisa Kiningsberg.
Lisa Klingberg. Miss Lisa. She's not there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm sorry, I couldn't get the, yes, I'm here. What I don't understand about what this is all, the people that have already spoken, I mean, we're dealing with a problem that doesn't actually exist in the state of Maryland. We don't have voter fraud here. I mean, there may be one in, very minor, tiny, very small numbers, but you're creating a problem out of nothing. And if we go down the route of these other states, it is just so disappointing. I mean, we're a practical state where, I've been proud to live in Maryland for the last 35, 40 years. And I've been a voter all those years. And so for people to start telling weird stories about what happened at the MBA, that somebody overheard somebody. And I mean, that's what we're reduced to, is telling these, anecdotal stories about, somebody said something. I mean, that we can't be dealing in just anecdotal stories. It has to be facts here, people. So let's just, let's not create problems where there aren't any. It's that simple. And I just hope that the board will recognize the fact that this system has worked really well for all these years. We don't have a problem here. So, that's it. That's what I want to say. We don't have a problem. That you're inventing solutions for problems that don't exist. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those of you who already spoken, please keep your hand down.
Please lower your hand.
Lower your hand. Those which you already spoken, lower your hand. Thank you.
We have Richard Johnson.
Mr. Richard Johnson.
Thank you. I was listening to the various things, and I think part of the problem we have here is perception. Republicans at the national level and in some states like Arizona have shown themselves to be totally dishonest, lacking in integrity, and plain un-American. Unfortunately, that carries over to Republicans in state. Whether they want to be known as the party of Trump or not, they are the party of Trump. So anything they suggest is going to be viewed through a negative lens. I think what we need to look at here is following the procedures which we've had for years, and they're in the law. How do you do that in a way that guarantees that not one single legitimate voter is removed from the rolls? Because I've heard about being disenfranchised if somebody who's not a legitimate voter votes. but that's not nearly as bad as a legitimate voter being told they can't vote because they've been removed from the rolls. So as I go forward, implementing the procedures, the devil is in the details. When you implement the procedures, how do you do it in a way that you can guarantee 100% that not a single legitimate voter, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, is removed from the rolls? That's my question, and that's what I'd like to see an answer to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Diane, hold on. Our board member, Diane, wanted to say something. Yes, Diane.
Hi, thank you, and thank you to the public. I am just gratified to see that there is such a huge interest in this. For the sake of civility, I just want to mention before we get much further into this, I don't think it's productive to have skirmishes between different commenters today. So if we could refrain from personally criticizing prior commenters, I think it would help all of us. And thank you, everybody. I am gratified to see and hear all opinions.
Thank
That's
you.
it.
Thank
Next, we
you.
have David M.
David M. Mr. David.
Hello, thank you. I can turn on my video also. First, I'm a two-time chief election judge, and I love the system that we have. And I've been involved in doing the kind of an investigation, anomaly detection of the 2020 election. And I will say this is a nonpartisan effort. To me, this is no different than doing a financial audit of corporations that we do, or some of the due diligence we've done. For some reason, doing an analysis, a deep dive analysis of the election system is somehow partisan. It can't be. We must have trust in our system. I mean, in January, ABC did a poll where 20% of the people, only 20% of the people, are very confident in the integrity of our election system. And I'm going to say, as members of the Board of Elections, that needs to really bother you, because for some reason, 80% of the folks don't have high confidence in the process that you're responsible for. And I think it's really, really important to investigate that and to regain the trust. I mean, it goes all the way back in '94 with Ellen Salbray, Gore in 2020, Hillary in 2016, Stacey Abrams in 2018, Trump in 2020. There's always been these claims of election fraud, and we just have to do an investigation. I've heard about exclusion. I don't know anybody who wants to exclude somebody to vote except for that illegal voter. I mean, the person just said 100% of the voters need to be legitimate. I 100% agree. Party, race, ethnicity, none of that matters. What matters is, are they eligible to vote? We've been looking at anomalies. We do see anomalies in the voter rolls that should be investigated and cleaned up. We saw 2020 voters, a large number of 2020 voters that are now inactive. Our question is why? Why are they now inactive? We saw 2020 voters who were registered in other states and actually voted in other states. Why? What was the process, the due diligence for reviewing those? 2020 voters registered at storage locations. Their registered address is an actual storage location. Why? How is that possible? And the folks here, and I agree. I mean, I don't work for the board. I'm not a prosecutor. So it's not my job to do the thorough investigation and to prosecute.
25 seconds.
Okay. So again, my only question to Board of Elections is, what's it worth to you to regain trust in the system? I understand you got limits, National Voter Registration Act in the state, but what's it worth the board to regain trust? I want trust in my system. I want trust in my republic. Please, please do more than what you feel is the minimal you need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Next.
Thank you. Next, we have Andrea Abrams.
Ms. Abrams.
Thank you. I've been an election judge since at least 2008, and it's long enough for me to be extremely proud and impressed, at least, of how Montgomery County conducts its elections. When somebody refers obliquely to what happened in 2020, if you're suggesting that there was election fraud, then you might as well say so. it's been disproved in every case that's been brought. So it's really pointless to talk about election fraud from the 2020 election because there just wasn't any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alan, you want to say something?
Can I suggest that other public comments on this subject wait until after Boris's presentation? He will answer a lot of questions, I think, and other board members may want to say some things at that time that would answer questions.
Oh, good point. Thank you, Alan. The rest of the board, what do you think?
I think that makes sense.
David,
Can we take the people whose hands are up now and end it there?
after that, yes, we go to the what Alan suggested.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
we have Holly Cohen, Miss Cooper, and Greg Decker.
So we have Steve Pressman, Holly Cooper.
What you just proposed.
Or you spoke.
I see 5 people who have their hands up. By the way, I don't know any of these people, but I see 5 people who have their hands up, and that was
After
what I
the
was
5
proposing.
After the 5 people, we stop.
Right.
Miss Holly Cohen,
Well-
Miss Cooper.
Steve Pressman.
Hi.
Steve
the
Press-
propos-
Yes, I'm here.
You're next. You'd like to address
Is it
the
my
board?
turn now? She called on me.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry,
Okay.
Miss.
The proposal that you just made may address my question. I'm having a hard time because I came to this because I'd heard there was a proposal that was to purge the voter rolls, basically, and I wanted to learn about it. And I'm hearing lots of heat and lots of anger, but I still don't know what the proposal is. And I'm
Excuse me,
hoping.
hold
that
on,
there'll be a time
hold
when-
on. Excuse me, hold on.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Our board attorney, you're going to clear your.
Well, yes, there's going to be no changes to the procedures for going ahead and look for list maintenance. The procedures are going to remain the same. The only thing that was going to be done was, a refresher on what actually is done in terms of list maintenance. So there's not going to be a change to any list maintenance procedures.
Kevin, I believe
But
that
then
she's
wasn't
referring
the
to the
proposal that-
inquiry.
Yeah,
I believe-
somebody's talked about an inquiry or a proposal that's going to be discussed at the end of this meeting, and you said there would not be a chance for the public to comment on it afterwards. So I guess as a member of the public, I'm wishing that we could know what this proposal or inquiry is, and then we could decide, do we have comments? Because I'm hearing lots of anger and lots of frustration, but I don't actually know what side I'm on because I haven't heard what the proposal is. And I don't want to just say, well, if I'm a Democrat, I'm on this side. If I'm a Republican, I'm on that side. I want to make an actual informed decision.
So a list was provided to the board of individuals who may be registered in Maryland and primarily North Carolina. And the director of voter registration began looking at that list and is going to give the board some preliminary information about what he has learned. But that would not alter in any respect the manner in which voter list maintenance is done in the state of Maryland and or more particularly in Montgomery County.
Well, I assume that the goal is if you take that list that somebody, I'm not sure who, provided, and there's a bunch of people who you think are on both lists, that the goal would be to purge them from either Maryland or North Carolina. So that does sound like it would be different.
Well, if there is a legitimate reason under federal law to remove them, yes. If there is not, then no. So I think I think Boris's presentation will help answer some of those questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa,
Steve Pressman.
Mr. Pressman.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
One of the earlier speakers said that 80% of the population does not have faith in the election results. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because Trump and the Republicans and Fox News have been telling them repeatedly for years now that the election was not legitimate and that Joe Biden is not really the legitimately elected president. So yeah, people respond to that. And then you're going to use that to bootstrap into these bogus so-called audits, the way Arizona did. We won't stand for that in Montgomery County. Comparing Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams to Donald Trump is ridiculous. They did not reject the results of the election and maintain to this day that their opponents were not legitimately elected. That's not, those are not analogous situations. I'm all for legitimate list maintenance. I hope you will do it as you have always done it in the past. But there is plenty of evidence showing that there is not real voter fraud. I want to bring to the board's attention a couple of items from various news sources. Associated Press reporters went out in 6 states to investigate for months, looking for voter fraud. And what did they find? They found that of 25 million votes cast, there were maybe 475 potential instances of fraud. That equates to 0.0019%. That number would not have had any effect, obviously, on the election. Millions and millions of dollars were spent by Republicans and Republican-affiliated groups looking for fraud that did not exist. A member of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission appointed by Donald Trump said, quote, "Every credible examination has shown there was no widespread fraud in 2020. Now, maybe you think, or maybe some folks think, that Montgomery County is an especially corrupt area. I don't. I think we are a very law-abiding community, and I have no reason, and you have no reason to think that there is fraud in Montgomery County. I do want to point out that just 2 days ago, the Miami Herald reported that they did find some voter fraud. The Republican Party canvassers in Miami registered more than 100 voters as Republicans without their consent.
25 seconds.
These were people in low-income housing projects who said later that they were misled by canvassers who told them they had to get a new ID card or change their address, and then the canvassers changed their party registration. So please do your jobs, do them properly, do list maintenance. Don't go creating a problem where there is none. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. Greg Decker, Mr. Decker.
Thank you very much, Nahid. And thank you all board members for being part of the board. And I appreciate all the public participation we have here today. You know, I've been part of walking neighborhoods and creating lists of voters for several election cycles. And I just wanted to testify on behalf of the folks who are very aware of how, and again, I'm not sure, I'm still a little confused about how much we can affect this, but I want to emphasize how disturbingly bad our voter rolls are. Many instances of, you know, a couple of households existing in a single house, kids who have moved on and become married and live in another state, grandparents who have passed on, they're still on the voter rolls. Okay. I can only testify as to what I have seen. I cannot testify that there's voter fraud. I can only suggest that if we're going to be in another situation like we were last time, mailing out blank ballots to everyone on the voter rolls, there exists the opportunity for fraud, okay? Let me just suggest that. And again, my testimony is that I have experienced the voter rolls personally. It's very annoying, and I've found many other people come back to me when I create walking lists for them for various issues or various candidates, and they say, well, wait a minute, why do you get, where'd you get this list from? I said, well, no, this is the official voter rolls. But in many cases, and I'm not going to try to put a percentage on it, but in many cases, they don't reflect who actually lives in these households. So I can only offer that as personal testimony, anecdotal as it is, but I have heard many other people who agree with me I don't know what we as the board, and again, thank you very much, board members, for participating in the board. I don't know what we can do, but it's not rocket science to audit these voter rolls, okay? We have ways of doing this. You know, we can make sure where people live. We have driver's licenses. When somebody moves out of state, they've got to change their driver's license.
Only
So,
2 minutes.
okay, that's all I needed to say. I just wanted to offer that perspective. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Decker.
Next, we have Anna Ray.
Miss Ray, Anna? Miss Anna?
All right, yes, sorry, I apologize. I had to take myself off mute. Thank you all. This is, I'm a Bethesda resident. I've been in Bethesda for 22 years. I've never been involved in politics. This is all new to me, but I was very disturbed myself when I went to vote in the 2020 election that I was not able to vote. I showed up and, you know, and I have 2 other friends. All 3 of us are Republican. We were not able to vote. We were told that we would, someone's already voted. You've already voted. And when I tried to resolve it, I could never resolve it. I was not able to vote. So with all due respect to the gentleman who said, the people who are saying that there is no voter fraud and that, you know, we can't purge the voter rolls, someone voted for me. I feel like my vote was stolen. So I've only gotten involved in this now because it was very concerning to me. And the dismissive attitude that everyone has here, that there is no voter fraud, when my vote was stolen, I take offense to that. Because there was some fraud that happened when I was told that I had already voted and I hadn't. And who's talking about Trump? Why is everyone talking about Trump in 2020? We're talking about Montgomery County in 2022. Everyone wants to just feel like our vote is going to count in Montgomery County in 2022. I'm not talking about Arizona. We're not talking about Trump. We're not talking about 2020. We need to do it right. We feel like in our county, we should all feel that, and I don't understand why we can't have both. We can have both. We're that good. We can have voter integrity and we can have the ability for every legitimate voter to vote. Because if you all are saying you're so concerned about purging people off the rolls, and I've seen the data that this group put together, that no one's been paid, they're all doing it on their own time. And if what they found is true, then we do have something, we have an issue that we need to look at. And I want my vote to count this time. I want to be able to vote. So we do have a problem and I hope that we can fix it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Want the last speaker to be addressed.
The last speaker is Susan. Miss
I have a question. I have a question for Ms. Ray. Did you try to vote provisionally?
I showed up on election day and voted. Yeah.
Oh, you voted?
I tried to vote. I showed up to vote and I was told that I had already voted that day.
Did you try to cast a provisional ballot?
No, they didn't give me any options. They said, you're done, like you voted, go away.
Okay, that's not right.
We have a problem.
Send the board the details about that, please.
Please don't be dismissive of us, people like me who had our votes stolen. We have a problem. Please listen, just listen. Why is everyone so afraid of an audit? If there's nothing there, then there's nothing to worry about.
Anna, they just asked you to put your information in so they can review your particular case.
Yeah, we're doing the opposite of being dismissive. We'd like to hear the details.
And I have another friend. I have a friend that lives 2 blocks over. It happened to her as well.
Send us the details.
Excuse me. Okay. Next speaker, Susan. Enough. The end.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm a Montgomery County resident also. And I really was struck by what Raj said earlier about that he was at a polling place and saw someone from the election board actually, if I understood correctly, trying to close the door and block out voters. And what I just heard now was someone gave a very important story for her about her experience. And I saw how responsive you all were in saying, please write us and let us know about that. And it sounded to me that Raj did write you all before, and that we're just looking for some accountability around what he said was that people were closing the door when there were active voters in line. They could have been Republican, they could have been Democratic. So I hope that there's a certain level of communication about those basic principles that should not be happening, because that also is voter, it's disenfranchising whoever those people were. And as many of you feel, I also feel that every resident of Montgomery County counts, and every vote that they cast should be counted. So I hope that whatever you're doing with the list maintenance, the principles that you're using to look over this list are communicated to us, to residents, so that all of us understand what it is, how you do this maintenance, because I think having that transparency around what's going on is important, and giving us an opportunity to actually give you feedback on what happened, on how we feel about what you're doing. So for example, having a time to comment at the end of the meeting, that sort of process issue that Holly Cohen Cooper, I think earlier I saw someone, she said that we need to have that process at the end. We really do need to be able to speak about it, because we haven't had a chance yet to hear exactly what you're going to do to maintain the roles. So thank you. If you could, it sounds like it's important to you all too to be transparent around communication, that you care about enfranchisement. So we do want to also have some input in that as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's the last speaker.
We have someone who just asked to speak, but we said that we would only take the first 5.
Why don't you let they can speak
Okay.
after.
That's the last.
After, right?
Yeah, let's get moving. We've
David
got
Levine can
David-
speak after the presentation.
Yes,
2 important presentations. to do.
after the presentation, no more question. Thank you. That's it.
We literally have one person who wants to speak, Nahid. Is it possible to?
That it may be another person, then we have to give everybody a chance, equal chance.
Okay,
So we said before, after that, we go after.
Yeah.
All right. Election directors,
Good
acting
afternoon,
director.
Allison McLaughlin, Acting Election Director. I actually, before I begin my formal report, I would like to just take a moment actually to note that the number of people who have joined this meeting is very impressive, and thank you. Thank you for your interest in the work of the Board of Elections. I do want to note, because I recognize many of your faces, and I've heard some of those who spoke already speak to being an election judge. The gubernatorial primary election is always the election in which we have the greatest difficulty recruiting election judges to serve. And so for those of you who have signed up, thank you. For those of you who have not, we are soliciting people to serve as election judges for the gubernatorial primary election. Our training begins on March 28th. So it would actually be very timely for those of you who are curious in our processes, interested in serving as an election judge. I wanted to make sure that that pitch was part of what we had to say while we have such an audience today. As for my formal report, the agenda for this meeting was posted on our website and provided to board members along with our draft minutes and the budget spreadsheet on February 18th, 2022. In addition, some action items that we had from our previous board meeting, the board had asked that we provide some information on the county council redistricting process, which we provided to the board, and we also put on our website, which was effectively before and after maps of the county council redistricting, along with a list of the precincts in each district. And those were posted to our website on February 3rd. We also put a redistricting page on our website on February 6th. And after this meeting, we will be putting the materials that are on our website for this meeting. We will also be posting those to the redistricting page so that you've got a comprehensive set of redistricting information on that page. The outreach committee of the board met on Friday, February 25th, and the recommended media budget for FY22 is on our website and is an item that we will be asking the board at the proper time to go ahead and please consider. Our staff member Hilberto Zelaya, who handles that, needs a go ahead from the board in order to make the arrangements for that advertising, and so that will be on the board agenda later, but it's also part of my director's report because it was an action item from the previous meeting. The third action item that we had from our previous meeting was that our board secretary and a substitute member of the board testified on legislation in between the last meeting and this meeting. I will leave it to the members of the legislative committee or those members who testified to speak at the proper time in this meeting on that as well. As for the State Board of Elections items, the first thing I want to notify the board of is that the State Board of Elections did meet on January 27th and approved the 14th early voting site that had been recommended by the board. As you will recall, the board had recommended 14. The state board had initially acted on 13 of the 14 because they wanted an additional confirmation of the formal approval by the Montgomery County Council before they approved the 14th site. So they have now done so. Also, at its January 27th meeting, the State Board of Elections gave final approval to regulations that provide for the acceptance of a common access card signature for military voters to sign the federal postcard application, to register to vote, update their registration, or to request a mail-in ballot. Another State Board of Elections item on the report is that at its meeting on February 16th, the State Public Works approved a proposed contract. This is the State Board of Elections proposed contract for new poll books to replace the ones that we have been using now for quite a few years. And so the legacy poll books that we will continue to use for the 2022 election are now scheduled to be replaced for the 2024 election. We have some printers, some additional printers that go with our older poll book solution that we are taking delivery of, and our staff is actually at a State Board of Elections warehouse at this time working on the acceptance of those materials. In addition, we have completed user acceptance testing on additional marking devices and digital ballot scanners that we received from the State Board of Elections to support the expansion of early voting and a return to full-scale in-person voting on Election Day for this election. The budget report that was circulated notes that our year-to-date expenditures, as of when it was circulated on February 18th, was $2,782,796. As is typical for an even numbered year, the majority of our budget will be expended at the very end of the fiscal year for the primary election. And we are continuing to work with the county's Office of Management and Budget to finalize a supplemental budget request for FY22 and are looking forward to the final decisions of the county executive on what his recommended budget will be for fiscal year 23. The monthly statistical report for December was distributed to board members on February 1st, and it reflected that there were at that time 678,340 active registered voters in Montgomery County and 66,108 inactive voters. And Boris will describe the terminology when he gets to his report. Personnel, we have two new staff onboarding, one today and one in 2 weeks. I want to, first, I would like the board to know and to congratulate Michelle Gonda, a member of our staff, on her promotion. Her new title is Vote by Mail Specialist. And we also will be welcoming Kevin Borsity, who many of you will remember as a former temporary employee of our office, who has applied for and has been hired into the election operations specialist position that you all will remember. Mary Beth Hable was the previous incumbent in that position. We have 32 temporary employees on the payroll as of last week. The increase was this month has been in those processing the absentee ballot applications that we've been receiving from voters and preparing for election judge recruiting and training. An update on the construction work here in our building. We have begun the modifications to the facility to accommodate the continuation of the high volume of vote by mail ballots that we expect for the election, while simultaneously returning to full-scale support of Election Day in-person voting, which we did not have, of course, at all of our polling places in the 2020 election. And so in order to do both, we've had to make some modifications to some walls and doors here in our building in order to make that work. We are going to be deferring some of the cosmetic work until after the election so as to minimize disruption in our preparations for this election. But we will have all of that work done prior to having live ballots here in our building.
Allison, do you have an estimate on when that might be?
I'm sorry?
Do you have an estimate on when they may be finished with that work?
Oh, the same.
Lisa, do we have a timetable on that? Maybe we can provide that to the board, provide that.
I'll look into it and sure.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank
We have taken delivery of some parts effectively of the ballot sorting equipment system that the county approved procuring through a statewide procurement. We opted into lease of some ballot sorting equipment to help us with the volume of vote by mail ballots and be more efficient, speedier in the handling of those. And we've begun to take delivery of that as well. The state board did begin mailing vote by mail applications. They were only mailed so far to voters who are registered with the Democratic or the Republican Party. Those were mailed on February 1st. It was a statewide decision to hold off on mailing applications to unaffiliated voters until after the close of candidate filing. And so those applications will not be going out to unaffiliated voters until after March 22nd. As of February 22nd, we had received 35,716 applications for vote by mail ballot. And so we are certainly seeing a high degree of interest in that. And of those that we have processed, 62% of those voters are applying for a permanent vote by mail ballot. We have contacted the nursing home facilities where we have a state requirement to have bipartisan teams of election judges go to the nursing homes or offer that opportunity to nursing homes to assist with voter registration in the vote by mail process. Of the 64 that we contacted, 54 have chosen to participate in the program. And at this time, only one large facility has declined. The participating facilities have 2,484 registered voters listed at their addresses. And we've also sent information on the upcoming elections to some smaller nursing homes and assisted living facilities that do not meet the requirements for participation in that program. We're going to have a presentation on redistricting in a little bit. And so I'm actually going to skip past the part of my report that covers redistricting because that is, I don't want to repeat myself. I'll cover that when we get to that point in the agenda. But I will note, and we can have this discussion at I request that we have this discussion after the staff presentation on redistricting, that we are going to ask that the board schedule multiple work sessions in order to we'll do this at a high level and the exposure draft effectively of the staff recommendations that we've provided for redistricting, but we're going to need to take a significant amount of time to walk through those precinct by precinct with the board members. So I'm going to ask that we find some time, schedule some time to have work sessions for the board. So we'll want to break out our calendars and figure out the best time to do that. We have made arrangements for the mailing of new voter authority cards to every registered voter in the county. Upon the completion of redistricting, that paper has been ordered and voters will be receiving an envelope with 3 pages of information, not just their card. They will be receiving information on the election and on their options to vote at the time that they receive their new voter notification card after the redistricting process. And I'm going to skip past the next part of my report as well because it also relates to redistricting, and I want to include that in the redistricting part of our conversation. Legislation, there was a printout of the current status of election-related legislation that was attached to my report as it was mailed out. There's a short list of some bills that the Maryland Association of Election Officials has taken a position on. I do not know whether any of the members of the board who have testified on legislation or the members of the legislative committee would like to speak to their testimony or to the status of legislation. But I will defer to members of the board should you choose to do so. The website has been updated with information on the approval of all 14 early voting sites, including pictures and addresses for each site. Links to updated information are there from the State Board of Elections on voter registration, as well as information for election judges and the new page that I mentioned earlier about redistricting. We're also working with the Department of Technology and Enterprise Business Solutions on a redesign of the part of our webpage that has media advisories, just to have that information be a little clearer and easier to follow for you. And we have a new box that we put at the top of the homepage for sort of most urgent links and announcements and information on the board meeting itself. The final item on my list is that the Outreach Committee met on Friday, February 25th, and that there is a recommended media budget for the primary election that was attached to the report. We can speak to that at the, I believe that is also separately on the agenda as an item. So I will not belabor that any further. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can move on to the board attorney report.
Thank you, Allison. Any question for Allison? Alan? Alan,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Okay, first, a question, well, sort of a suggestion about the website. I'm afraid, Allison, you're still listed as deputy director, and Margaret Jurgensen, the past director, is listed as director, and she hasn't been director for several months now. So I hope you'll change that so that it will show that you are acting director and Janet Ross is acting deputy director. And in that connection, I'm not aware of any press release or announcement that announced your accession to that position or Janet's, and I hope that we will do that really soon. It's been 2 months now. On the legislation,
Before you get there, Alan, can we see whether that's something that our colleagues agree with? Because I really agree with you about an announcement going out.
Okay, so I move that we have an announcement. Should I make it a motion, David?
If you want, I mean, maybe just be a consensus, but I would think that we need to have some kind of an announcement. Madam President, is that something that we can all agree to, or do you want a motion? Because we can make a motion if you'd like.
We need a motion. We don't need a motion. We just
Okay.
those you can raise their hand and they agree.
Okay,
So-
I would just suggest that we try to get that announcement out sometime this week.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Understand? Yes.
Thank you.
Diane? All right.
Fine.
And the
Okay.
second thing,
I mean, thank you. Yeah, so we would do that. Allison, please do that.
Okay.
So it's done. Anything else? No.
yeah,
Board attorney. Yeah. Yes, Alan.
okay, yeah. The second thing about legislation, I submitted written testimony in favor of the bill that we discussed at the last meeting, Senate Bill 158, introduced by Cheryl Kagan. And I sent the board my written remarks on that, and I testified about that verbally at the Senate committee hearing. That bill has gone all the way through the Senate. At the present time, we're waiting to see whether a corresponding House bill will be introduced. David Moon has a bill which replicates it to some extent, but doesn't go as far as this bill does, in order to let us start canvassing ballots 8 days before the primary. Delegate Moon's bill would prevent us from canvassing during the early voting, and that would stymie us as far as I'm concerned. So his bill is in committee, hasn't gone any further so far as I know, and I don't know whether Mayo is taking a position on that. Maybe Allison can tell us about that. Then the second thing is, David and I both testified on Senate Bill 163. 163, you may recall, the board unanimously supported the section of Senate Bill 163 with regard to the 50-50 split of, oh no, it's 158 rather, 158 addressed the 50-50 split between state and the state and the local boards on goods and services that were required by the state. And so I'm not aware of where that's gone. I can find out.
That bill is still being considered, by the House. Just to explain, the 50-50 split is the cost of election equipment, for example, and whether the state can impose those costs on the county. And our board has unanimously indicated our support for requiring that it be a 50-50 split rather than the local government getting the entire bill.
Right, yeah. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, David. Since you finished before attorney's report, I would ask Mr. David Levine, whose the hand was up, to speak, because he's the only person with the hand up from the public.
I've been an election judge for many years. What I'm hearing, whether it's from the thing at the motor vehicle, turning people, closing the door early, not giving them provisional, that's not voter fraud. That is clearly problems with people not following the rules. But that's not voter fraud to me. Voter fraud is, somebody changing someone's vote. Anyway, I agree there are things that should be tightened up, but I'm not hearing any convincing reason that convinces me for need for an expensive audit that isn't going to address the issues. That's it.
Thank you. Board attorney report, Kevin.
Thank you, Naeem. So let me start with preparation for the primary. We are exchanging red line versions of the MOUs with the county and with the city of Gaithersburg to secure early voting sites, as well as to have drop boxes at all of the high schools and some other locations. There's an issue in terms of making sure we have enough security. I mean, that we have the security footage is maintained long enough. We're working through that with county security. I don't really see any major issues there. So I hope to have those agreements in place in the next 30 days, certainly by the time we have our next board meeting, to go ahead and finalize those loose items for early voting and for the drop boxes for the primary. As many of you know, there are two challenges going on. One is a congressional redistricting challenge that is being heard by Judge Battaglia. Judge Battaglia is a retired judge from the Court of Appeals. I spoke to Andrea Trento today, who's the Assistant Attorney General handling that particular piece of litigation. The current schedule in that case is that is going to be tried on March 15th through the 18th. And Andrea believes that a decision will be issued by Judge Battaglia on the 21st. And then that, by rule, can be immediately appealed to the Court of Appeals for review. So that's really on track to be before the Court of Appeals, presumably sometime in early April. The state redistricting litigation is in front of Judge Wilner, who's also a retired Court of Appeals judge. Judge Wilner has scheduled a hearing and has set forth the following dates for that particular litigation: that the parties are to exchange discovery by March 11. They are to submit their proposed findings of fact by March 22. A hearing will be held on the merits on March 23. And then Judge Wilner will submit his report as the special magistrate assigned to oversee that litigation to the court on April 5 of 2022. And then the parties will then have the opportunity to file exceptions to anything within Judge Wilner's report and recommendation. So both of those pieces of litigation are tracking to get in front of the Court of Appeals, I think sometime in sort of early to mid-April. And that doesn't answer when it's going to get resolved, because no one has an answer to that. That's solely in the hands of the Court of Appeals. I'm sure they will act quickly, but how quickly is certainly for them to decide. They don't have a specific timetable for issuing a decision. Does the board have any questions of me?
No question? No.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You.
New business. Maintenance presentation. Boris.
I don't know.
My name is Boris Brajkovic. I'm manager of water services with Montgomery County Board of Elections. I'm going to present the water list maintenance activities of our board, and the presentation will focus on processes, data sources, and volumes that we tackle in the board. Before I start, just two items. One, this presentation will be available on our website, 777vote.org, and additional technical details on list maintenance processes can be found on the same website under voter registration tab.
Boris, can you increase your volume, please?
Okay, legal framework that we follow when we conduct list maintenance is federal legislation, namely National Voter Registration Act of 1993. We follow state legislation, which is election law and COMAR, and we follow different sets of procedures that are prescribed by the State Board of Elections of State of Maryland that direct how to conduct list maintenance activity. When we talk about list maintenance, in essence, at least in the board elections, we are talking about all the processes that create voter record and possibly change the status of those records over time. These processes include voter registration updates, cancellation without confirmation, cancellation after confirmation, inactivation, and reactivation.
Minimized. There you go.
When it comes to voter registration, I'll go very briefly over it. The first are requirements that are listed on voter registration application itself. They refer to citizenship, residency, age, no guardianship or mental disability, no conviction for buying or selling votes, or the fact that people serve court order sentence of imprisonment. Data source for initial voter registrations are voters directly. Voters have multiple options to register in the state of Maryland, Board of Elections here in Montgomery County. That could be online through our website, or they can go to the state website. They can do it in person through MVA, different state designated agencies, or they can even use the text option on their smartphones. Data that is gathered in initial voter registration is verified against MVA or Social Security Administration databases. If it happens that certain data is not verified initially, we do a follow-up mailing to those voters, asking them to provide additional documentation that will prove that they meet the requirements to be registered in the state of Maryland. Since last elections, we registered, please, I need a slide. Since last elections, additions to voter roll in Montgomery County, new voter registrations are over 42,000. Voter registration updates, in essence, refer to change of address, name, or party affiliation of already registered voters. These data sources are, again, voters directly or indirectly via different government agencies. We are talking, for example, jury commission, courts, or similar. Again, every voter who would like or who needs to update their voter registration for whichever reason can do it online, can do it in person through MVA. Participating in petitions that are organized on the territory of the Montgomery County, and the data is collected, and we can update your voter registration record based on the input you provided in the petition. Voter update form is available at the polling place on the election time. When it comes to the voter registration updates, this is the volume that of the records that we processed since the last elections. Party affiliation changes 14,000, address changes 52,000, and name changes almost 37,000. Cancellation without confirmation is the process when we cancel voters' record as listed in the voter roll. This happens in case when voter requests it directly, when voter submits voter registration cancellation form, which again is available on our website, or they provide us with a written statement with the signature that they would like to be removed from the voter registration list. Another case when we cancel voter registration without confirmation is when we receive a notice from another state that voter registered in that particular state. The third option for removing voters without confirmation is when we receive death notice from Maryland Department of Health on deceased individuals. The next process is cancellation after confirmation. And here we have two different examples of two different sub-processes. These processes depend on the source of data that triggers this confirmation. The first case is when we receive data from administrative office of the courts or federal courts that relates to felons. When we receive data from jury commission for deceased or non-citizens, or when we receive ERIC deceased list of citizens, our residents, citizens who passed away in other states. In this case, we provide the letter to individuals, giving them an option to reply to give us reasons not to cancel their registration. If we don't hear back from them within 2 weeks, their voter status is moved to cancel. Cancellation after confirmation, the second case is based on, again, different source of data is received. In this case, we are talking about address changes that are received through National Change of Address database, returned mail that we send out to our registered voters that bounces back to the Board of Elections, jury commission data on address changes, ERIC address change. In these cases, we will send a residential confirmation notice to these individuals, giving them 2 weeks to respond, and confirm the address. If we receive reply, we keep the status, we update the status, keep it active. If no reply is received within 2 weeks, the voter status is moved from active to inactive. Since last elections, we sent out 84,000 residential confirmation mailings. transition of inactive status for registered voters to cancel status. I prepared today 2 examples. First, when we receive data on address change. As I said earlier, we would send a residential confirmation notice to that address, and if no signed response is received within 2 weeks, the voter will move into inactive. If that voter does not update his or her record or fail to vote in 2 consecutive federal elections, they will move into cancel category.
Everyone muted? Hello?
I don't know. Where they are.
Excuse me, please mute yourself unless you're a board member.
Okay.
Yeah.
Second example refers to mailing, different kind of election mailing that we send from the Board of Elections to all registered voters that comes back, that returns to us as undeliverable.
Suffering succotash, you better mute yourself.
Vacuuming.
Barry, can you meet them, please? Thank you.
We have, I've noticed as I attempt to glance at the chat that there has been a fair amount of noise about the 2-week time frame that you just mentioned. Can you just go ahead and, while you're on that topic, go ahead and
On mute, wait, I'm on mute.
just one.
Is there a mute?
Just one voice, just one voice.
Okay. Good now? Okay, before I move to the next slide, let me just pick up a question that was posted in the chat. What happens if residential confirmation notice is not returned within 2 weeks, but let's say in 3 or 4 weeks? We follow the law. After 2 weeks, if no response is returned, we will move the voter from active to inactive. Once that residential confirmation notice is actually received by the board, we will go into a record, issue a correction, scanning that confirmation notice with the signature, and voter status will be moved to active again. I hope that answers those questions. As I said, the second example, when we move voter status from inactive to cancel, is in case of return undeliverable mail. Return undeliverable mail is highest, most likely source of data for us to keep residential addresses current on the record. The same process is followed. The same residential confirmation notice will be sent. We will wait for 2 weeks. If no response, signed response is received, we will inactivate the voter. Voter will become canceled if they fail to either update their record or vote in 2 consecutive federal elections.
And Boris, just so it's clear, an inactive voter has the same rights as an active voter, correct?
Absolutely. I'm getting to that on this slide. So this is the language that is used in the law. This is the language that is used in this building, and I would like to bring it maybe a bit closer to you all. Active status, in essence, refers to all the voters who are registered with Montgomery County Board of Elections and for whom we know their residential address. When it comes to inactive voters, as two previous examples shown, we do not know their latest current residential address. In essence, inactive voters retain the same rights as active voters. We will list them on the poll books, and they can show up at the precinct of their choice and vote on the elections. They will vote at the polls. They will have to sign under oath a note affirming their residential address. We will provide them voter update forms that they can also utilize. If they change the address beyond the time that is set with the cutoff of the registration date, they will end up voting provisional ballot. The data collected on the provisional ballot will be used by the Board of Election to change their inactive status into fully active. Transition from inactive status to active status. Every voter who currently has inactive status on our list, all they need to do is update their voter record, and that will transition them from inactive to active. They can also do that by signing a petition or submitting a vote by mail request. Additional option is to show and vote in person during early voting or election day. That will also change that status from inactive to active. These were the slides that covered the processes that we use in the list maintenance. Additional sources of data is the next segment of the presentation, and the biggest part refers to Electronic Registration Information Center, otherwise known as ERIC. ERIC is a data exchange platform for the states. It was established in 2012. State of Maryland was one of the 7 states that formed ERIC. There are currently 31 states and Washington, D.C. that are participating in ERIC. Any further information on ERIC itself can be found on their website, which is ericstates.org. I will not go through the whole list, but this is the list of all currently participating states in ERIC. In Montgomery County, we have a very vibrant community. We have a population that relocates to different parts of the country, but primarily moving south, staying on the East Coast. Therefore, the participation of the southern states in ERIC is the key for us to gather the data that we need to keep the list up to date for all those voters who were our residents, were our voters, but moved down south. ERIC participating states share their data roles among themselves. That data is also compared to Department of Motor Vehicles, very likely using maybe different names, different states, but that's the essence, is the department that the data is captured and compared. Additional data source that is being compared with is Social Security Administration's death records, and of course, National Change of Address, NCOA, which is USPS national program. State of Maryland, and by extension, the Montgomery County receives 5 different reports from ERIC. These are in-state address changes, in-state duplicates, cross-state address changes, death notifications, and NCOA address updates. I'll just go very briefly with each of these reports. In-state address changes, we receive them every even month directly from the State Board of Elections. We are given 10 working days to process it, and the total records received since last elections is a bit over 8,000. In-state duplicates, again, we receive them every odd month, again from the state, 10 days to process, 231 in-state duplicate processed since the last elections. Cross-state address changes. This data is received every even month, again 10 days, and since last election we received almost 30,000 records. Death notifications, as I mentioned earlier, these are the records that are compared against Social Security Administration database, we received 282, and NCOA address updates, we received almost 88,000 records that were processed against the records that we have in our voter list. Another source of data that we use for list maintenance is Administrative Office of the Courts. This data is received monthly. This data refers to felons who have been sentenced for by court order sentence of imprisonment. Last month we received 10 records like that. Maryland Department of Health provides us every month with the list of deceased voters and who are then canceled on our list. We received 382 for the last record. Jury commission list. This list is received quarterly. Last data said that we processed 236 names that appeared on the list and on our voter registration rolls as well. All these processes that I mentioned earlier are subject to certain quality controls. First of them is in-house proofing. This is something that's not mandated by the state. This is something what we do in Montgomery County Board of Elections. In essence, we prove each other's work. Almost every record is touched by two different individuals just to make sure that no error was made. State Board of Elections, on the other hand, reviews our ERIC processing results. They review records that were in, that were processed, and then the total description on the voter roll on the end. And there is a third system that is in place. It's in essence cross-county review, where counties are assigned to review certain segments of data from different counties. This data includes additions to voter lists, which are new registrants, canceled records, party affiliation changes, records that we received on felons, deceased records, and vote by mail applications. This review happens monthly. Challenges. We rely heavily on return mail with yellow sticker that informs us that person has moved from certain address. Undeliverable mail that is not returned by the current resident is an issue that we try to address by reaching out to our whole community. Roberto Zelaya does that part of public outreach. We even tried to partner with the municipalities last year just to increase the public messaging. If a resident receives a mailing for someone who used to reside in that premise, house, apartment, or similar, we always ask everyone, please do not discard it, just send it back to us. That is, in essence, a data point for us to start inactivation process. The second challenge are college students. We have quite few students who study outside of the state. We received quite few registration updates from them, where a certain level of misunderstanding is quite often projected on the papers, where instead of listing their residential address in Maryland, they provide us with the dormitory addresses in different states, which in essence creates cancellations, multiple phone calls, reactivation after new submissions of the document. The third aspect is that in Montgomery County, people do move. People move between localities, people move to and from surrounding states. It is not always the case that once person moves from our county to another state, that they necessarily submit the paper to get their voter registration canceled before that move happens. The next aspect is federal ballot only voters. We have quite few voters on our list who have relocated outside of the United States. By the law, they are eligible to vote, but for the federal races only, President, Vice President, Congress, and Senate. Therefore, it's called federal ballot only voters. The confusion is created with the fact that in order for them to be registered on our list, they have to provide the last known residential address in state of Maryland. And in some cases, that's the address that these people used to own or rent 10, 15, or 20 years ago. The next challenge is overlapping data. As I have shown previously in the course of presentation, we receive data from multiple sources. And it's possible that sometimes data overlaps, and not all data comes with necessarily date stamp on it. We use the best judgment we have to tackle it, and therefore we always ask voters to provide us with their contact information so we can reach out in case it's needed. And the last thing is that states that are not participating in ERIC. If state participates in ERIC, that gives us better data sets to update the voter rolls on our end, and also gives better set to other participating states to update voter rolls on their end. Current status, just a small note, every month, first working day of a month, we publish monthly statistics for the previous month for the Board of Elections of Montgomery County. On those monthly statistics, you will actually find all this data related to active voters, inactive voters, subtractions from active or inactive status, and totals. For the sake of this presentation, I just added a few items that might be interesting, and they refer to a number of 16 and 17-year-old voters, which is almost 10,000 at this point. Federal ballot only voters constitute 5,200 in Montgomery County. And military and overseas voters, I have to go only by because this number is fluid because people change their presence in the United States or abroad. For the last general election, we had almost 9,000 so-called Ucala voters. As I said earlier, additions to since last election, these are new registrants, it's 42,000. 60,000 people were moved from active status. Please note, they can move either to inactive or canceled directly from active status. The same goes for inactive. They can be moved to active status if they vote, update their voter record, similar, or they can be canceled if they submit the request to be canceled, pass away, or register in other ERIC participating states. Total number of canceled voters since last election stands at 44,636. That would be my presentation.
Thank you, Boris.
Thank you, Boris. I just like to add a couple of things. And Boris mentioned the 16 and 17-year-olds. Under Maryland law, you can register to vote when you're 16 years old. They're obviously not able and eligible to vote. They are put in a pending category until they reach the age of 18. So they're able to register, but they're not actually voting at 16 or 17. The next is that I think there is this misconception that the state board of the Montgomery County Board of Elections has the databases of municipalities that allow their voters to vote when they're 16 or 17, or that they are non-citizens. The Board of Elections does not. In MD Voters, the statewide database, the only individuals that would be in that database would be individuals that are either 16 or 17 are in a pending category, and or they meet the requirements for being a registered voter, namely they're a U.S. citizen who's over the age of 18 or older. And my final point is that some people ask, well, you know, how do people stay on the voter rolls? Well, Boris just went through that the board needs something, a triggering activity to begin any process to do list maintenance. So they need to get information from a government agency, or they need to go ahead and get return mail. our Court of Appeals in 2003 in a case called Maryland Green Party et al. Versus Maryland Board of Elections, and it's at, for anyone who wants to read it, at 377 Maryland 127, 832 Atlantic 2nd 214. It's a 2003 opinion. Basically said that under our Maryland Constitution, the right to vote is not subject to expiration for voter inactivity or for any other non-constitutional justification. So unless the board receives information that would begin the notification process under the National Voter Registration Act, the board does not disqualify individuals because they have elected not to actually actively participate in the voting process for a number of election cycles. So I see there is a message in there. If a 17-year-old will be 18 before the general election, are they allowed to vote in the primary? And the answer is yes. It's on the basis of a decision involving, I believe they lived in Chevy Chase, but it was a young lady who was going to be 18 by the general election. But I'm drawing a blank on the name of the case. It was probably 10 years ago. There you go.
Okay. Should we go to outreach?
I think we need to go to outreach if Alex needs to leave.
Outreach committee. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So we're gonna, one of our board members needs to leave. So we're gonna go back to this this issue in terms of the list involving Maryland and North Carolina. But since Mr. Vincent was on outreach, why don't we do that first?
So good afternoon, board members and the public. My name is Gilberto Zelaya. I'm the Community Outreach Public Information Officer. We're going to look at the media proposal for the current FY22, which covers the 2022 gubernatorial primary election. To the board members, if you could look at the spreadsheet with the media outlets, and I want to thank also publicly Mr. Vincent and Dr. Barnes for facilitating and having a fruitful discussion regarding the media outlet proposal. 2021 was extremely successful and very fruitful with the established relationships we have, not only with the public, but also with the media outlets. In addition, I do welcome everyone who was who's on the today on our virtual meeting to recirculate our posts on social media. There's a lot of good information that would also provide some opportunity for our voters to engage the Board of Elections, but also to help us in list maintenance. In addition, a quick shout out for individuals again to serve as poll workers, to register to vote, to update and review your voter registration, and also encouraging individuals to start formalizing a vote plan. There's 3 options, which are voting by mail, voting on election day, and or during early voting. Now, looking at the media outlet proposal for 2022, I wanted to keep everything as static since those established relationships were extremely fruitful. Where I would like to add, in addition to the identified outlets, is expansion of language access, since Montgomery County does have a diverse electorate. Nationally, we always have between 3 to 5 of the most diverse cities in Montgomery County. Those are identified as Gaithersburg, Germantown, Silver Spring, Rockville. And so having said that, I would like to move to add 2 additional outlets, the Astra Advertising and Vietnamese American Services, which will extend and expand our outreach efforts within the Amharic speaking community and the Vietnamese American speaking community. Having said that, we would reduce the African Mirror newspaper by $2,000 to afford these 2 new vendors $1,000 to expand our language access. As I go down, Google AdWords was very fruitful. We had over 2.3 million impressions or searches on Google and over 20,000 hyperlink clicks from individuals who wanted, points of references to help them formulate a vote plan. Between the African Mirror, Senior Beacon, the Korea Times, the Washington Chinese newspaper, the Washington Hispanic, those were very productive and fruitful in relationships we had in communicating with the diverse electorate. And also we will keep static the covered radio stations between Radio America, El Sol, WMAL, WMMJ, WPGC, WTOP, Wash FM, WIHT, WMZQ, and WWDF. If you look at those radio stations, they are the top radio station outlets in the DMV. So I want to keep that as static as well. Moving forward, I would like to motion for the board, or there's any questions they may have, moving forward with the FY22 media proposal, which will take us once again into the 2020 primary election.
Do I have a motion to accept this budget for outreach?
Did you want to make the motion, Alex? You're on mute, Alex.
We need to unmute Alex from our end first before he can
Yeah,
unmute.
maybe it's
But now, okay.
okay.
No, at least I'd be happy for you to make a motion. I just wanted to say that we had a very good discussion with Dr. Z about this, and you and I think, are in agreement that this proposal is a good one for getting our message out about how to vote and when to vote to a very diverse electorate. And I just wanted to thank you for the time you put into it, Elise, and I'm happy to support this, and I would recommend it to the full board.
And I will move that we accept the proposal as submitted. And I think Alex is going to second.
Discussion.
I second that motion.
Those in favor say aye. Or raise your hand. Thank you. Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Z. Thank you, the committee. Next.
I go back to the north.
Try to schedule work sessions for the committee while Alex is
Yeah, we
still
will
here
do
too,
that.
or should we
We will do that, yes. Old business, redistricting. What, Boris, what?
North Carolina review?
North Carolina
Yeah.
or?
Oh,
or
North
something?
Carolina business. Okay, go ahead. Boris.
When it comes to,
But before you get to that, Boris, we were not given a chance to ask questions about your presentation. I was wondering if I could ask a question about your presentation.
Okay, go ahead, David.
So the presentation talks about a 2-week trigger for things that go out in the mail. And I saw my colleague, Mr. Banoff, is really good at coming up with the, the regulatory citations. And he had a citation to regulation that says that there is a 2-week limit when it comes to convictions. But it sounds like we have a 2-week trigger on a lot of things. And I just wanted to find out if that is a federal law, a state regulation, or something that the board can change. Because I know that there's a lot of people who have seen our mail service not being nearly as efficient as it used to be and would be worried about that. And then my other question about that is that as I understand it, what will happen after the 2 weeks is that someone goes from active to inactive status. So they don't necessarily lose the right to vote at that moment. So I guess the question would be, what happens to someone who doesn't respond in 2 weeks? Does it merely put them into inactive status where they can come back? Or is it possible that the failure to hear in 2 weeks results in their being removed from the rolls? Thank you.
okay, I'll start with the second part, Dave, if you can. So as I tried to explain earlier, so we give 2 weeks deadline to receive back the mailing that goes out to any identified voter. If mailing doesn't reach us back in 2 weeks, yes, we move voter into inactive status. However, in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whenever that mailing eventually reaches us, we go into voter record, issue correction, and move voter back into active status. And we scan in that mailing that came back with the signature as a proof with the date on it.
So is that also a reason why there might be a large number of people who have voted in the 2020 election, but have also moved into back and forth into inactive or active status? Is it possible that someone doesn't respond within 2 weeks, they go into inactive status and then you put them back, or how does that work?
Absolutely, it's possible. So every time we receive data set, either NCOA or anything else, that person might have moved, or we do a mailing and mail bounces back, we have to move. We have to issue a residential confirmation notice, wait 2 weeks, and move person into inactive status. At any point where that particular individual goes to NVA to change their address on their driving license, get a new one, update anything, we will get that data set, and the data set will be processed and voter status will be changed. They will go back into active status.
Okay, so if they don't respond within the 2 weeks, they have not lost their right to vote. They've gone from active to inactive status.
That's correct. They do not lose right to vote. As I said, inactive voters have absolutely identical rights to active voters. They will appear on the poll books. They can request to vote by mail. They can vote in person, whichever way they like. If they are up to date on their voter registration, they will be moved to active. If not, there are multiple ways for them just to follow election process, and the voter status will be moved to active. Vote, update your registration, sign the petition, anything that's possible.
Okay, now is the 2-week limit in terms of moving people into this status, is that something that's specified by federal law, by state regulation, or is it something that the board can decide?
David, this is Kevin. I think it's state regulation, but I'm going to get the site and I'll send it to the entire board.
Okay, because the regulation that deals with death notices does not have a 2-week on death notices, at least not that I saw. Perhaps you're looking at something different, but it would be useful to know, because I think there'd be a lot of concern about the 2 weeks. Thank you very much.
I will, and just, as Boris has said, inactive voters do retain the same rights as active voters. So, they wouldn't be removed until they fail to vote in 2 federal election cycles. And that was also another point made clear in the Green Party case, that there is no real distinction between an active and an inactive voter.
Well, I'll leave
Thank
it
you.
back here. This is Allison too, merely because I do see the volume of questions and comments on this topic in the chat. And maybe it's, helpful just to point out another side of this as well, which is that what the existence of an inactive status does for us in many ways is it's our flag that we have some reason to believe that this person may have moved. We've gotten a yellow sticker on a mailing that came back from that person's residence saying this person is no longer there. And so there is something different about that voter than the voter that we did not get such a notice back from. And so from there on, while the voter is still retaining the ability to vote, they're still in the poll book. We did in fact receive something that suggests that that voter is no longer at that address. And so the existence, whatever it is called, but the existence of this inactive status is what that does for us. And so that's what allows us to then trigger the need to verify, have that person affirm that they do in fact still live at that address, or if they show up to vote when we have reason to believe that they've moved, then that triggers us to verify what the correct ballot style is, where they're actually eligible, to vote in, which may be in a different part of the county. It might be a different state legislative district than the address that we last had them at and got some returned mail that said they're no longer there. I just wanted to interject that.
I found the site.
Alan?
I found the site for the 2-week notice.
Oh, okay.
Maryland Election Code, section 3-504, paren C, paren 2, and there's a little I, then a Roman 2, Arabic 2 rather. The 2-week notice is there. That basically what this says is that whenever a local board receives a report obtained by the state administrator under subsection of this section that includes a registered voter, the election director shall mail to the address shown on the statewide voter registration list by regular US mail a notice that states that the registered voter has been reported by the Social Security Administration to have died, notifies the registered voter or person attending the affairs of the deceased voter, the voter will be removed from the statewide voter registration list unless within 2 weeks after the date of the letter, the registered voter or representative objects to the removal and shows cause why the removal should not proceed. And there's more to it, but that's basically it. It's section 3-504 of the Maryland Election Code.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. I see and have Margot. It's Margot, Lisa.
That is correct. I see Margot.
Miss Margot or?
That's Margot. Would you like to address the board?
Yes. Oh, yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's out. It's you could speak. Oh, hello. Yeah, it's actually my daughter Turquoise. Hello.
Right.
Can you?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
hi. Sorry, I actually am looking at a mail from the official election mail right now, and I wanted to come in person today for that exact reason, partially because I wanted to return this. That's not to. It's an old roommate, and I don't know where she's moved to. And there's no option on the outside of the envelope that says this person has moved. And I was actually just discussing that with my mother, that it would be nice to be able to have an option that says this person has moved. I would like to send this back. And there's nothing outside of the envelope that says that. The address is correct and this person did used to live here, but there's nothing that says like They haven't lived here for years. check this box. They haven't lived here for years. So it just might be a good idea if we had that on the outside of the envelope And then we could just stick it back in the and we mailbox. could just stick it back.
The chat has a good suggestion, which is if you write return to sender on the envelope,
Right.
it will come back to us.
Because it came with mine and I was just going to do that, but it would be, just to be clear in terms of the whole, there's been a lot of back and forth. I've been reading the chats as well myself. And I just thought it would be to make it clear that this person did used to live here, but they no longer live here, to be very clear that in terms of the clarification of this person has moved. And it's an easy box to just like print, to type print and onto check the, mark. to print on the, on an envelope, so. So in terms of clarifying, like we have because there was just a comment of a suspicion this person has moved, saying this person has moved, they don't live here.
Okay,
Just-
go ahead first. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your suggestion. Like, we will write it down and we will certainly see with the state if the box could be added. The bottom line is here. Every time you receive any piece of mail which has official election mail log on it, all it's needed is just to leave it back to the mailman. It will reach back to us. The post office processes the returned election mail, and we go by the yellow sticker that post office applies to the return mail itself. So, point taken, but that's the way also to go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we move on. I don't see any hands. And David's hand is not up. All right then, thank you. Old business redistricting. That's which one? Oh, you're going to talk about North Carolina? Okay, I thought we finished the North Carolina.
Okay, I will just very briefly touch upon the North Carolina data set that was mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting. I was asked to take some preliminary look at the data set itself, to take a sample to see if there is a pattern in the data itself. The data set has 159 records as they were provided to us, 130 of which are, according to the paper sheets, from North Carolina database. The remaining records are from multiple states and binverified.com search engine. I just looked at the North Carolina data set. And I looked at the 17 records until I established the pattern that is as follows. The name that appear on those lists from North Carolina do appear on the MD voter database that we use in Montgomery County. Every registered voter in Montgomery County that appears that list in the sample that I review has a mailing address in North Carolina. The reason for that mailing address, I could guess like anyone else, whether it's school, business, or anything, but that's the fact. Out of 17 records that I review, 6 are already in inactive status, while 11 are active. And I compared the data set as provided on the sheets against voting history of those 70 voters. And the review shows that there is no overlapping voting activity by these voters in two separate states. The fact is that we, in my personal belief, we should have received this data through ERIC if North Carolina had been part of ERIC, but that's not the case. Okay.
Thank you. Any question? What?
Yes.
Yes, yes, David.
A couple of questions. First, a question for you, Madam President. You said at the
Yeah.
start of the meeting that we were going to be talking about Mr. Sullivan's concerns. Is that going to be at this point in the agenda, or is the North Carolina discussion what you had in mind for that?
Huh? That's it.
Oh, well, if that's the case, then
Because his question was people registered in here, Montgomery County and North Carolina, and Boris explained the North Carolina situation.
well, I have a number of questions related to that and to the process that was followed for that. But I guess my first question is, Boris indicated that he compared a list of North Carolina voters with a list of Montgomery County voters with mailing addresses in North Carolina. The Democratic members of the board received a list of Montgomery County voters with North Carolina mailing addresses, but we did not receive a list of, I'm sorry, yes, we received a list of Montgomery County voters with North Carolina mailing addresses. We did not receive a list of North Carolina voters. I did ask the board whether we had received, I believe it was about a week ago Saturday, whether we had received all the information that the staff had received, and I did not get an answer. So my question now is, did the board receive information that included a list of North Carolina registered voters? And is there a reason why it was not provided to us?
Kevin?
Madam President?
I turned that list to Kevin. Kevin was the one following it with Boris. Kevin.
Madam President, I might be able to shed some light on Mr. Naaman's question. Whatever I provided on that Saturday, a week ago Saturday, is what everyone received. What I noticed was there was a spreadsheet that appeared to be of North Carolina registered voters. That's what it looked like to me. But beyond that,
thank you, Alex, but that doesn't answer my question. And first of all, it would have been nice to have had that answer 10 days ago when I asked. But let me just again say, what we got was a spreadsheet that showed a group of voters with Montgomery County addresses and North Carolina mailing addresses, and nothing on their face said anything about their North Carolina voting registration or whether they had voted in North Carolina.
That's
So,
the only one I had understanding to.
How do you know it wasn't Montgomery County, North Carolina? That's what I'm not sure about. That's what
I'm
it
looking
seems.
because I recognize the addresses and the zip codes, Alex. They were Montgomery County addresses, and it said that their mailing addresses were in North Carolina. So I will ask the question a different way if that'll make things easier. I mean, basically, I'm asking whether Naheed was sent information that was not shared with us, that was shared with Boris.
No,
And
that whatever, David, whatever I sent, that one was I had. That's the one Mr. Sullivan sent it to the board and through me. That's the one I just copied to everybody.
so you're saying that we all received, now it was several
Yes,
weeks later, but we all received everything that you received.
Yes, yes. Otherwise, why should I keep it secret?
Well, that's a good question, because there were a lot of
I
things.
sent whatever I got, that's the end of the story.
Well, it
Whatever
is
Mr. Sullivan
not,
sent me,
unfortunately.
let me talk. Whatever Mr. Sullivan sent me, I forwarded to the board, period. That's the end of the story. I
Okay,
did not
well,
hide anything. I did not sell anything.
all right, Madam President, if you would allow
You
me,
keep repeating the same thing, David. Think about it. Why should I hold on some of the list and send the rest of the list? Whatever
Well-
he sent, I send it to you.
okay, so let me make my point, Madam
Mhm.
President. And here is my point. The board agreed in October of 2018 that all non-routine letters addressed to the board president would be automatically copied to all board members. And that definitely did not happen here. And this is definitely not a routine letter. So we received from you for the first time an email that you sent to the MCGOP chair on the 16th of February. And that was the first time that you copied all board members at our personal email addresses. You made no mention of any of the previous correspondence.
Okay, let me tell you one thing.
No, I'm not done.
No, no,
I am not done.
let me talk.
Let me finish.
Because the
I am
way
not
he
done.
sent it was not official. That's why I keep asking Mr. Sullivan, send it officially. He just send it to my attention. I said, you have to send it officially. The right procedure. Send it to me, to the whole Board of Election. He did not. That's the time I got the official one. I send it to all of you. Before
Okay.
it was not official.
So here's the part of the story that I find very disturbing, because I agree with the people who said today that voter fraud should be a bipartisan concern, that clean voter roll should be a bipartisan concern, and that in order to have the trust of the voters, and there's a lot of distrustful voters with all political persuasions right now, but the way that we make people trust our process is by having a process that everyone feels that they are involved. And here is what happened. On the 9th of February, the Montgomery County GOP issued a press release demanding that the board take action and calling on Democrats to join them. But nothing was said at that time to Elise Allen or me by anyone. On the 16th of February, a week later, we got this letter, we got this email from you in which you are responding to the MCGOP chair, and he's saying he's been corresponding with you for 3 weeks since January 26th. First, we hear about it.
Doing it in the right way. That's why I didn't
Okay,
want to answer it. I didn't want to do
please let me
anything.
please let me finish.
If I
on
would do
this-
that, you
on-
would say I did illegally.
Okay, on the 16th, you emailed that to us, and on the morning of the 17th, I sent an email on behalf of the 3 Democrats on our board complaining about our being left out of the loop on this. And only after that, we were informed and provided a copy of a February 15th letter, literally the day before your email to all of us, that was from you to the chair of the Montgomery County GOP, that copied our Republican colleagues, that copied the chair of the Maryland Voter Integrity Group, but that did not copy us, and that indicated that the material that the MCGOP had provided to you was being provided to the Director of Voter Services. Now, 2 points about that letter. Number one, we weren't told about it at all, and our colleagues were. Number two, why was the information going to the Director of Voter Services? Why did it not go to the election director? Ordinarily, that is who we deal with. Is there a reason why we did not do it in this instance?
I forwarded to the board attorney. He does the following. I didn't want to get involved.
Okay, And my question is for
As soon as
Kevin.
I got the official one, I send it to everybody. Kevin
Okay.
got-
No, you sent a letter to the Montgomery County GOP that we were not copied on that indicated that the staff was looking into these questions at a time that we had no idea that that was happening. And when you sent us your email on the 16th of February, it did not say the staff is looking into this. It did not, it did not say that you had written to him the day before.
David, the election director was fully aware of it because I had had a meeting with the election director, the acting director, the deputy director, Boris, Lisa, Chris. We had a meeting to go ahead and discuss things, and I gave the material with Allison's permission to Boris because he would be the logical person to look into something like that.
Okay, and then why were we not informed? Why were Elise, Alan, and I not informed of what you were doing with a number of members of the board staff? We are a bipartisan board.
I understand that, and I know that Naheed was asking Mr. Sullivan to go ahead and submit a letter to the board for it to be formal action to be taken on.
Now, let me understand this though. If he submits something informally, we're going to have a meeting of our board attorney and 5 staff members to decide what to do without telling the Democrats. But
No,
only when
actually, David, there are a lot of things going on, and this is not really the biggest priority. We were actually meeting to go ahead and discuss redistricting. But I brought the materials with me and I raised it with Allison, and Allison knew that Boris was going to take a look at it so the board could be updated today.
Well, I will just say that we were literally being asked in a public setting by the MCGOP to help them fix the voter rolls without knowing that any of these conversations were taking place. I personally would like to see what they provided. I still have some question as to whether we have everything, because again, the document we received said nothing about North Carolina voter registration. It only talked about North Carolina mailing addresses. But we as a board have a policy that is 4 years old almost, that says that all non-routine correspondence goes to everyone. And there was a letter sent by the board president to the MCGOP, copying the Republican members and leaving the Democratic members out, and copying a member of an interest group and leaving the Democrats out, and talking about what our staff was doing without our knowledge. Whether that is, we can debate whether that's a good way of doing business, but it's certainly not one that is going to make the majority of Montgomery County voters comfortable with how this inquiry is being handled. We are the majority. We are the minority on the board because state law says that, as you know, because the governor's political party decides who is in the majority on the board. But Montgomery County voters want to know about this kind of activity, and they expect all of us on both sides to be paying attention to this activity, not for it to be handled by one side without the other.
And the letter you're referring to is a letter from the board president to Mr. Sullivan saying, please make a formal request to the board so it can be shared with all board members.
And then it is also saying, it also says, Mr. Karpinski is working with the Director of Voter Services to analyze the list you have provided and provide the board with a report regarding their findings. In addition, I have directed the board staff to prepare a short presentation for our board meeting on voter list maintenance. Now, I literally sent an email the next day asking for this to be put on the board agenda, not knowing that Naheed had already written to the Republican Party chair saying that there was going to be a presentation, because I wasn't copied on this letter. But this letter shows, I mean, basically actions were being taken and some board members were in the loop and others were not. And then, the Maryland Voter Integrity Group is copied on this letter, but we were not.
I did not copy the Maryland. I did not copy any of those people. That's the reason I keep asking, send it officially to me that I can share it with that. And no
Nahid,
leaking the source.
Nahid, I am looking at the letter right now and it indicates a CC to Diane, Ami, and Alex and Robin Sachs with all of their email addresses. It is on the letter.
No, I did not do that.
Well,
The
I'm telling
letter
you,
I sent it to the board,
I would be,
just the board.
I would be happy to send you a copy of this letter, but they are indicated as a CC on the letter. And needless to say, we were not told about it. We got an email the next day that didn't even mention that this letter existed. So you can, perhaps I know that my email upset some people, but perhaps you can understand why we were upset. We're not potted plants, as Brendan Sullivan famously said when he defended Oliver North. We're members of the board. We expect to be involved in discussions of this type.
If I may, I think perhaps I can maybe help fill in some of the gaps and clear up some of the confusion on this. I think because the role of the election director and the role of formal communications with the board is part of the concern here. The first that I learned of this was the same press release. I believe that other members of our board saw it. Quite frankly, I got a call from a reporter asking me to comment on a press release, and I had not seen the press release. I didn't know what it was about. There was a letter that was sent to the board the next day, actually February 14th. We received the letter. It was a cover letter with what it said, that it had a thumb drive with some data in it for us to take a look at, formally conveyed to the Board of Elections for us to take a look at. And there was no thumb drive in the envelope. It looked like the thumb drive must have been removed for the envelope. There was an attempt to formally communicate this information to the board as an entity, that I could then take a thumb drive data information formally communicated to our office to be able to share with the members of the board as we would. But in the meantime, the information that had been shared with the board president shared with the board attorney, as this uncertainty about what information this was for me to formally communicate with the board members was unfolding. It certainly made sense to me for Kevin to go ahead and have Boris take a look at it and say, what is this all about? What is this data even? Can just take a peek at it, see what it is. But I did not have the formal request. I did not have the formal request of the board in order to share it with all of the members of the board.
Well, let me just say that my complaint is definitely not with Boris doing the research on this. I have very high confidence in Boris. My complaint is that we were not told that it was going on. And in fact, the day after the letter that was sent that said it was going on, we received an email that made no mention of it, that was ostensibly the first communication, but clearly wasn't. So from our perspective, our antenna was up, and then when I did ask a number of questions, and a number of them were not answered, and some of them have still not been answered. Then that certainly got our attention. Our board works on a bipartisan basis much of the time, and I would just like it to be all of the time. This was handled in a very unusual fashion, any way you look at it.
Here, I found the email.
Can I?
Which I sent it, excuse me, hold on. Which I sent it February 16. After I received the official request from me to Mr. Sullivan, then copy to all board member, Kevin, Allison, and I sent it, said, good day, Mr. Sullivan. I received your request for review of voter roll. I have requested our board attorney, Mr. Carpenter, to investigate and follow it up. We'll be in touch if any additional information is needed. Regard, Nahid Khuzaimeh. And then I include whatever he sent me, I send it to you. Isn't that good enough, Mr. David Neiman?
No, it's not, because in that message, you did not tell us that Boris was working on anything, nor did you tell us that you had written a letter to the GOP the day before and had copied
I did not. As soon as I got his request, because he kept complaining that I'm not responding to his email or anything. That was one of the
Well,
complaints.
perhaps, Madam President, you did not remember, but this was sent out by Kevin's office. It was, it indicated a copy to the Republican members and to Robin Sachs of the Maryland Voter Integrity
No,
Group.
my email did not go to anybody except
I'm
the board.
not talking about your email. I'm talking about the letter the day before that we were not told about. And what I'm suggesting is that when something comes in from a political party, whether it's yours or ours or any other, that is of this kind of a sensitive nature, that's all the more reason to be bipartisan and all the more reason to follow normal process. And normal process was not followed in this instance.
Mr. David Neiman, you were telling that email that, oh, 2015 Public Meeting Act, and you made the whole shred, and we prayed in front of the council like shooting range. What do you want to do? Shave my hair and walk me through the street? I mean, you should be ashamed of yourself. I try to follow the rule and regulation. He keeps sending it. I keep saying we need to be officials. As soon as I got his official letter, I send you all the copy, whatever he sent me. And if I send one thing, I send it to Kevin because I didn't want to get involved. I don't want to say, oh,
Naheed, I asked you multiple times.
Change the thing which please you. You wanted to have the last word, and I don't.
No,
take that one.
No.
You're going to complain to the Attorney General? Go ahead and do that.
Okay, well, if you're encouraging that, maybe I will, but I will just say.
As soon as the Republican become majority, when Jim Shalik was here, you give them a big gift. You complain about Public Meeting Act and sent to Attorney General.
I did not do that. And it's surprising to me that this many years later you still don't know that, but I did not do that. But let me say, we sent a letter indicating what happened. We did not send, we did not file a complaint. We were witnesses. We did not file a complaint. But I will say that I'm not seeking to have the last word. I'm seeking to have a word. I'm seeking to have an opportunity for us to know what's going on. Madam President, I asked you more than a week ago if this was going to be on the agenda for this meeting. I said Alex had suggested that it be on the agenda, and I had suggested that it be on the agenda. Will it be on the agenda? And you never responded. So I didn't know coming into the meeting today whether this was going to be on the agenda or not. Only thing I knew that was on the agenda was Boris's presentation.
What does it make a difference? We have old business, we have new business. You always can bring anything those under old business or new business. So what does it make a difference if it is an agenda officially or it's not? Because agenda, everything was done. And I have a sick person which is dying in my home and travel all the way from Paris to here to be with the family. Do you understand the pressure? And meanwhile, we're doing redistricting, all of those things. I follow what was supposed to be right procedure. I did not answer this. I keep saying, send it official. As soon as he sent official, I sent it to all of you. I did not copy anybody else. And as it came from Kevin, because I told Kevin, you're the board attorney, please follow. And I did not, whatever, did anything wrong, David. And don't talk anymore about my situation.
Madam President, first of all, I'm sorry to hear about the person who you say is having a health issue. But let me say,
please.
Well, you have it whether you want it or not. But what I am saying is that you know, I do have concerns about the process that was followed in this situation, and I don't think it encourages the public to be confident in how we handle things. And you know, and I know, and I think all the board members know, we have a highly competent, excellent staff, and when we all work together, I think we're capable of great things and have done some great things. But in this particular instance, we definitely felt like we were being left out in the cold, and we didn't think that was appropriate. We still don't think that's appropriate. And you know, we are we are full members of the board, and that's really the only point that I was trying to make.
David, if to the extent you were not copied on the initial response, that would be my fault, because obviously it was a reply all to an email and it just went to those that were on the initial email. And so you were notified the next day. I apologize for that.
We were not notified the next day. The next day was when we got the email that didn't mention the letter. It was only after I complained about being left out of the entire conversation that you then sent me a copy of the letter.
Okay, well, to the extent you were not part of the initial response to Mr. Sullivan, then I take full responsibility for that. It went to those that it was initially sent to. So we will work on our communication. There's room for improvement.
Oh, whoops.
Is there can we move on to redistricting?
I wanted to say something. I put up the wrong thing. Alan had his hand up first, but I just want to tell David that from my vantage point, there may have been clerical mistakes about who was CC'd and copied. But if we all work bipartisanly, I think that there needs to be a spirit of goodwill. And the whole tenor of this just is so accusatory unnecessarily. And I personally didn't like your email that said, well, this is eerily reminiscent of something that has preceded us. And then in the same sentence, you said, but it's not that. So it was kind of for the board members who were privy to the prior incident, it was like pulling a scab off a wound. And I just want to assure you that from my understanding, well, from what I know, the information was received. There was a problem in that it was not sent to the president. I know that Nahid from the first step, when we finally did talk, because we were not, the board members, none of us were calling each other, emailing, talking about this thing, because Nahid's objective was to follow the proper procedure and get it to Kevin. And I think Kevin has explained, and I'm just all confused about the timing. I think we are making, I am not diminishing the sentiments of the Democrats, because I really want us all to work together, and I think we do. So I understand that you're upset about this. I can only give you my assurance that there was not a circle or a channel of communication going on with this information before you got it. I didn't know what staff was doing. I understood it was going to Kevin so that we didn't violate any process. And I guess that's the key.
Well, and I thank you, Diane, and I appreciate your personal assurance. And as you know, I have great respect for you. What I'm complaining about is not just this one instance, but it's, we had a policy since 2018. The fact that we were not even told that it was going on is the problem. I would hope that if the shoes are on the other foot and we won't know for another year, whether whether the shoe will be on the other foot or whether we will continue the way that in the positions we are now in terms of majority and minority. But I would hope that we would all do a better job of keeping each other informed about things like this. This was not just a typical letter. This was a letter after a press release, calling on us to make changes to how we handle the voter rolls, much of which, as you know, is covered by law. The idea that and if I did upset people by referring to 2015, that is, I remember what 2015 felt like for me. And what that felt like was, that we were being, rolled over and ignored. So that was a traumatic thing for us as well. But I'm happy to hear that there's an effort to try and do things the right way, and I hope that we will continue to to try to do that. I did send an email to all the board members a week ago Saturday, basically saying, is there more material than what I have? This doesn't seem, seems pretty thin to me. And nobody responded. And so now, admittedly, I could have, kept asking. But as you know, I already have a reputation for, for repetition. So I didn't really want to do that, but nobody responded. It would have been nice if somebody had responded then and said, we only got what you got.
Right, and appropriately, because I know that Nahid's objective and everything she did was to follow the proper procedure to get it to Kevin so that things would go in the right direction. I didn't feel it would be helpful at all for me to get involved. I mean, I think if I could just pledge to you that if
as a
there were
result,
any
no one did.
mistake, but let me, which we didn't know, because that's like kind of proves my point in that the pledge I want to give to you is that we were not communicating together about any of this because we understood the sensitivity of it. And I think you raised another really good point, and that is we knew that we were constrained because we are under very strict statutory guidelines, the law, HAVA, the other laws that govern what we can do, we couldn't do anything anyway. So some inflammatory press releases may have come out, but we were constrained to do anything. I understand the emotion in all of this because this really is a hot topic for everybody. But again, I will just end by pledging that the communication that I had was in Nahid's hand because I did call her about this. She was following the proper channels, needed Mr. Sullivan in order to trigger any process, needed to get it to her as the president. Anyway, I won't take up any more time, but if you can just know that all of us really respect the relationships we have with all board members and with the Dems. And if I can just pledge to you, if there were any mistakes, there was no nefarious activity, there was no activity. And I guess I'll end it there, but thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
We can move on to redistricting.
Yes. Redistricting.
Why don't we go ahead and pull up the county map and it shows the jurisdiction lines. Well, here's how I would like to proceed. We have a very large task facing the board that is going to take hours and hours of your time, which is that we need to go precinct by precinct, polling place by polling place through the county, and we need the members of the board to examine the boundaries. And so what I want to do is I want to begin with an overview, and then I want to lay out the process that we have followed to this point as a staff. And I want to familiarize you with the exposure draft of the precinct by precinct information that we put out last night, and it's on our website. And then this is, we're not asking for any board action today. What we're asking for is for you to get a sense of the process that we're following and to get a sense of the work that lies ahead. And then we want to schedule work sessions for the board to go precinct by precinct through this process. So what you see on your screen right now is, we affectionately call this the spaghetti map, because what you see is it's kind of like a plate of spaghetti where we have lines on top of lines on top of lines. And what you see is the green lines are the congressional district boundaries in law, the new congressional district boundaries. The blue lines are the legislative district boundaries in law. The red lines are the county council district lines. And the yellow lines are our election district lines, which is kind of an artifact of the county charter where we cannot allow a precinct to overlap an election district line. So while there is no, oh, and the orange lines I neglected to mention are for the Board of Education. And so we cannot have a precinct boundary overlap a yellow line, even though there's really no difference in the ballot that a voter would receive on, say, the left side of the yellow line or the right side of the yellow line. But it is a legal boundary that we cannot have a polling place overlap. So if you were beginning with a clean slate, then what you would do is that you would take these areas of the map that are within, that are in a white section of the map where there's no lines intersecting, and you would divide that up to begin creating polling places, and I'm sorry, creating precincts. However, you're not. You're beginning with the precincts that we already have, which is where the voters are accustomed to voting and voting at their polling places. And so you have history to take into account, and not just the new lines. So what we historically do, what we do every 10 years, is we go through and we look first at really where are there changes that you are required to make because we have a new line that is intersecting, that is cutting across an existing precinct. And then secondarily, we look at what that does to the rest of the map. And you have the discretion as a board to adjust these precinct boundaries to reflect not only what you're required to do by virtue of redistricting, but also to make discretionary decisions as well to, say if there's too many voters in an elementary school and you want to move a line so that the lines won't be as long in that polling place. So what we have done is we have gone through, and I'm going to actually pass on to Janet Ross, who is going to begin walking through this with you. But what you have is this map in front of you that gives the big picture. And then there's actually a list of 3 different worksheets, all of which are on the board materials for the website, on the website, and that were distributed to the board members, where you see sort of a working document that Janet is going to describe, and how we first went through this working document and identified the splits that are occurring. And then from that working document, we identified polling places where there's no changes needed, polling places where there are changes needed. And after we have gone through this process, and Jen is going to speak first to the process, and then Chris Ezet, our operations manager, is going to speak to some more considerations in this process. Then you'll get sort of a big picture sense of where we're going with this, and then we'd like to go ahead and set up some working sessions. So Janet, why don't you go ahead and begin to sort of lay out what we've done and give the examples that you've got prepared.
Okay, I'm Janet Ross, the acting deputy director right now. And how we begin is we take all of the maps, the Board of Education, the county council, the legislative, and the congressional We take all of those individually, and for each precinct, we mark within that map where the precinct falls. Then we end up with the final jurisdictional makeup of that precinct. And that's how we create our master list. It's a lot of verification that goes through it to make sure it's correct. And on the website, the list that I'm talking about, there's the master list, there's the no changes list, and the proposed change list. So I'm gonna go over how we created the master list, and Chris is gonna go over some of the proposed changes. So like I said, we took all the maps individually, marked down where each precinct fell in that map, and then we had Louise, who was our GIS person, create what we call the spaghetti map, where it's all the lines overlaying. And then we take that map and we look to see where precincts were split. And if you look at the master list, the lines that split a precinct by a new congressional line are shown in green. A line that split a precinct by a legislative line is in blue. And so if we look at 0101, we can see that there's a green line coming down, and it was split by a congressional. Part of it's now in congressional 8, part of it's now in congressional 3. So we have to look around to see if we can match any other precinct to create new precincts or whatever, but Chris is gonna go into further detail about that. Then if you look over at 206 to the left, over here, Louise, right there. Right there, you can see that it's split by a legislative line. So again, we do the same thing. Can we match it with another precinct? It doesn't call for a new precinct. Okay, so that's a congressional split and a legislative split, but we also have what we call a realignment. If you look at 805 and 814, they now have the same jurisdictional makeup because a line was moved. So 814 has a very few number of voters in it. So, but now it has the same jurisdictional makeup as 805. So we can combine that precinct and get rid of 814. So that's the process we're doing with redistricting. We're looking at where the precinct was split, either by congressional or legislative, and those precincts that we can realign because a line was moved and now it has a jurisdictional makeup of something next to it, and we can create a bigger precinct and eliminate some of the small ones. So the 3 examples I showed you, Chris is going to give you some of the proposed changes we just have for those 3 examples so that the board knows how to read the sheets that we gave them and can study and look at them before our next meeting. We don't expect you all to go through all of this today. We're not. We're just going through the 3 examples so that you all can look at it on your time.
Thank you. Chris?
Good evening. My name is Christine Zizit, and as Mrs. Ross just mentioned, I'm going to further explain some of the redistricting process and some of our final proposals. We have taken 3 examples to present to you, and as we go further into redistricting, we'll be presenting more precinct information as we go through the scheduled meetings that we have planned for over the month of March. If you look at the center, upper center portion of your map that is on your screen, you will see what Ms. Ross mentioned in the beginning of her talk. We have a green line which divides 2 congressional districts, Congressional 8 and Congressional 3. That line goes up through a great portion of what we call Precinct 0101. It has divided Precinct 0101 in half. One portion is in 8, one portion is in Congressional 3. So as we looked further into the details, we noticed that Precinct 0107 was now modeling the same jurisdictional makeup as the eastern portion of 0101. So our proposal to the board will be to combine 107 and 101 into one precinct. We will leave the precinct number as 0101, and we'll retire the precinct number 0107. This will make one entire precinct and one entire ballot style. Then when we look at the west of the green line, where we're in congressional 8, a portion of 0101 is in 8, and a portion of the top northern portion of precinct 0105 is in congressional 8. These two geographic areas have the same jurisdictional makeup. So our proposal to the board on this particular piece would be to create a new precinct, an 0108, combining the northern portion of 0105 and the western portion of 0101. That will be a new precinct. Now, the next area that Mrs. Ross talked about was precinct 0206. And that is a rather large area, but if you follow the precinct line, and one thing that I didn't mention, precinct lines are designated by the fine black lines that you see on your map. So precinct 0206 was divided in half basically by a legislative line. We have proposed that we maintain the precinct number 0206 in that square-like portion that's in the center of your map. And then we have proposed that the eastern portion of 206, which Louise is marking with the cursor, will now be a new precinct. And it'll be, it'll now be precinct 0214. So here again, we've created another precinct. And then the last example that Mrs. Ross gave you was where we talked about a realignment. And we'll go over to the eastern part of the county. And the major precinct there is 0805. And you'll see a smaller precinct, which is 0814. With the new districting lines, 0814 and 0805 now have the same jurisdictional makeup because the jurisdictional makeup is now the same. We're proposing to the board that we include 0814 into 0805 and we'll retire the number 0814 as a precinct. Now, beyond that, we don't have any other examples to discuss, but we will mention that as we go forward with the different sessions, we will have the same scenarios to offer in different areas of the county. And once we're completed, we will have gone through the entire county and included all the changes. And we'll have given the board a chance to look at our proposals. We're asking if you have any questions, the board, you may contact Mrs. Ross at her email, or you can contact me at my email as well. Now I see that we have hands up. So shall we go? Oh, they're from before, except for Mr. Banoff. I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. I've forgotten, is there some optimum population for a precinct?
We're trying to look at an optimum of about 3,800 to 4,000 voters.
I'll say though, that is, you know, Alan, obviously we're able to accommodate more voters in, say, you know, the Silver Spring Civic Building than we're able to accommodate in, you know, some, you know, church basement somewhere, elementary school. So, you know, it really, while we have historically and can generally speaking say, you know, that there's a kind of an arbitrary optimum, realistically, based on the parking, based on the circumstances of the, available facilities, obviously that matters too.
Thank you.
Right, we have Mr. Naaman, did you have a question?
David, you're muted.
Unmute, Mr.
I
Naaman.
think we have to unmute on our end first.
Jerry, can you unmute him?
One moment, Mr. Naaman, we'll get to you.
Thank you, Chris, for that excellent presentation. Can you move the map back to 1-1? Because
Yeah,
my question is about 1-1. It looked like there were two different portions of 1-1 that were not contiguous. And I was wondering if that's my needing new glasses, or if there's something going on there that that you can explain, because I wasn't aware that we had precincts that were the same precinct but not contiguous.
You're correct. On the map, you can see that division up along the waterway there. It was during the 2010 census that we were confronted with these issues of non-contiguous precinct. And we have reviewed the law, and I don't know if Mr. Karpinski wants to add anything, but we found that it is legal to have a non-contiguous precinct. It's not optimal. We try to avoid it, or try to avoid recommending that situation to the board. But in some instances in 2010, it was our only viable solution.
That line that separates 0101 and 0107, I believe, was the congressional line. And
Oh, I see.
0101 then runs into 1201. So you've got the election district line where a congressional line came over, ran along the election district line, and then came back again. And so that was the geography that we had to deal with 10 years ago. And actually now the line moving allows us to resolve the issue that we had 10 years ago that caused a non-contiguous precinct, and now it doesn't have to be.
It won't be.
Okay, so now 1-7, and then part of the non-contiguous north part of 1-1, and then the east part of the southern part of 1-1 will all be one precinct.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the explanation, and thank you for all your work on this. I know there's a lot.
Yes, thank you.
Add that as you go on the documents that are on the website, the spreadsheets, it's the one that's labeled redistricting worksheet preliminary staff recommendations. Then the very first row that you see, you have the pairing of what we're calling 0101B, which is the section to the right of 0101, and 0107, which would then be merged into 0101. So you can sort of follow along on the worksheet that tracks what the map does.
Okay, any other hand? Mr. Neiman, lower your hand because
No, I'm sorry. Yes, no, I do not. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Naaman. We have a hand up, Barbara Nouveau. Would you like to make a comment or have a question?
That's okay. All right, thank you very much.
She's muted.
Thank you, Chris. That's okay, yeah.
When are we gonna have future meetings?
Yeah, we have future meetings.
Yeah, that's.
Do you want to do that,
In my
Allison?
director's report, what I had thrown out there, and this is really up to the board, but what I had suggested is that we simply take your typical customary 2:30 time slot on a Monday and use that to meet weekly moving forward as you get a sense of the pace and of how long this is going to take for us to do this work. If you'd like to pick a different day, any time of day, any day of the week that works best for the board, we'll make that work on the staff side. But what we have a tool available to us. Thankfully, we have the professional services of Louise Warner here on the staff that we did not have 10 years ago when we went through this exercise, where we can show you the, you can get a peek straight into the GIS software. And it's very efficient, much easier for you to take a look at that, kind of walking through the GIS software than for us to send you paper maps, where we can just kind of go precinct by precinct by precinct and answer your questions.
Okay.
So I don't know if Monday afternoons works for you or a different
You're
day.
going to have a voting session. Okay, thank you. Action item. Do we have any action item? You don't?
No.
Okay. Approval of minutes of January 24.
The action item includes the announcement of Allison and Janet, right?
Yeah.
Change it on the website, the announcement and a press release.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Adam. All right then. Approval of the minute, January 24, 2022.
I move we accept the minutes of the January, where was that? 24th meeting.
Do I get a second?
This is as amended.
As amended,
Thank you.
our last copy. Excuse me.
I will second that.
Liz seconded. A discussion? Those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Future meeting is March 21st. Alison, are we going to have a working session?
I'm absolutely working sessions. We're going to need multiple sessions between now and March 21st. So I don't know if you want to set that time now or if you want to.
Given
Okay.
the need for public notice, we may want to set that time now. And I'm fine with the times that Allison proposed if other people are.
Yeah,
too.
and to reiterate, was that the 2:30 Monday?
Yes, 2:30 next
Okay.
Monday, 2:30 the Monday after that.
Yes, got it.
Monday is
I'm
Monday,
good.
Monday, March was.
March
Seven.
Okay, everybody got it?
And those will be public meetings, so people will be able to observe that as well.
And
All right.
it might be the next 3 Mondays, correct?
2 Mondays.
Right.
Or we
Two,
have
I'm sorry.
Then we have the board meeting.
a board meeting, yes. It's going to be by Zoom, right?
Correct.
Okay, right. Everybody's going to be by Zoom. Lisa will send the information, right, Lisa?
Correct, that is.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, then, if you know business, do I get a motion for adjournment?
I move we adjourn.
Who's going to second it?
I think Ami is trying to put her hand up. I don't know if we can
Ami?
unmute her.
Oh, no, has she been muted?
You can check.
Oh,
Ami
she's
raised her
been
hand.
muted. If you,
Okay. if
Raising
Ami
her
can-
hand should be sufficient, don't you think?
you waved your hand.
We understand.
Yeah, I think that means Ami seconds it.
Okay, then, those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Maybe somebody want to stay here for dinner. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Have a good evening. Thanks, staff.
Take care. Stay well.